Chapter 864. Su Haokol walked over with a hearty smile on his face. Yin Jian met his face. She returned his smile without losing any of her poise. I'm here to look for my brother. After a pause, Yin Jian asked again, where's my brother? Yin must be with Su Haokol. Yin Jian was certain of that. Went to the toilet. I'm waiting for him here. The competition is starting soon, Su Haokol said simply to Yin Jian. Yin Jian nodded. Su Haokol was Su Zetian's son. Su Zetian was currently managing Falcon Hall on behalf of Yin Jian. Some time ago, Su Zetian was severely injured and handed Falcon Hall over to Duan Lei to manage. At that thought, Yin Jian asked Su Haokol, how's your father's recovery coming along? Little sister Yuni knows about my father's injuries? Su Haokol was slightly shocked. Although Su Haokol was Su Zetian's son, he knew that his father's dragon head gang had been taken over by a woman named Rakshasa and was renamed Falcon Hall. However, Su Haokol had never heard Su Zetian mention who the current boss of Falcon Hall was. Moreover, he did not know if he knew that Yin Jian was the current boss of Falcon Hall. Su Zetian didn't reveal a single thing to his son. Hence, when Su Haokol heard Yin Jian ask about his father's injuries, he was stunned for a while. However, Su Haokol was stunned for a while, but still nodded in confusion. Dad's much better now. He's almost recovered. Even Su Haokol was stunned, let alone Ning Lanlan and the others. Which teenage girl would ask about her father's injuries directly when meeting someone she knew? Yin Jian's actions made it hard for others not to overthink. However, Yin Jian wasn't bothered at all. She pointed at Ning Lanlan and introduced her to Su Haokol. She's my friend, Ning Lanlan. Then, everyone present got to know each other. However, not only did Ning Lanlan remember Yin Jian asking about Su Haokol's father's injury, but even Xiao Jiming and Shan Zihao remembered it. Shan Zihao almost blurted out the question. Why did Yin Jian care about someone else's father? But in the end, Shan Zihao held back. It had to be said that Yin Jian gave Shan Zihao a good first impression. However, Shan Zihao couldn't help but feel a little suspicious after hearing what he said. Could it be that Yin Jian had an affair with Su Haokol's father? Just as she thought about it, a voice familiar to Yin Jian rang. Xiao Jian? When she snapped back to reality, it was Yun Yi who was walking over from the washroom. Go. Yin Jian grinned and introduced himself to Ning Lanlan and the others. Once everyone was familiar with each other, she strolled to the center of the competition area. When she saw Yun Yi, Yin Jian could not help whispering to him that Qing Yu was coming back soon. When Yin Yi heard Yin Jian say that Qing Yu was coming back, a glint flashed across his deep eyes. There was no need to mention how excited he looked. Qing Yu had been spending time with her parents in her hometown recently. Now that she was coming back, of course, Yun Yi was delighted. My parents will come and cheer for me. Su Haokol had just received a call and came back excitedly. For those who were about to start the competition, it was undoubtedly the happiest thing to have their family by their side. There was no other. Once he heard that Su Haokol's parents were coming, Shan Zihao's dark eyes flickered as he turned to look at Yin Jian. Shan Zihao had thought that Yin Jian might be having an affair with Su Haokol's father. After all, it was a little unreasonable for a girl to ask if someone's father was okay. Chapter 865. Comparatively speaking, Su Haojia's current mood was simply indescribable with excitement. When Su Zetian was the boss of Longmen City's top mafia group, Su Haokol dared not reveal the news to his friends. When Yuni found out later that Yuni treated him like a brother instead of distancing himself from him, it was impossible for Su Haokol not to be touched. What outsiders did not know was that Su Haokol yearned for his father's love and care. Su Haokol had known since he was young that his father would not appear in public. His father's birthday banquet was even used by Su Zetian as a meal to better bond with his father. What more the usual occasions? Su Haokol's results were excellent. Although he had the capital to get in through the back door, Su Haokol and Yuni had both gotten into DE High School with their own abilities. He did not want to use his father's status as the boss of Longmen City. However, everything seemed to have changed after Dragon Head Gang was taken away by the woman named Slaying Luo. His father was still the boss of Falcon Hall, but now his father had much more free time than before. Since his father was heavily injured recently, Falcon Hall's boss, Slaying Luo, had given his father a long vacation. Su Hao Cole was very happy now because he had hoped that his parents could be by his side. Now, his parents could even take time out to visit him. Su Hao Cole was very grateful to Slaying Luo of Falcon Hall. If Slaying Luo were to stand in front of him now, he would definitely thank her profusely. Isn't that a good thing? Haha. Yun Yi was in high spirits as well, wrapping his arm around Su Hao Cole's shoulder joyfully. Su Hao Cole nodded solemnly as he looked at his good buddy who was willing to talk about anything. Yun Jian smiled faintly as she stood on the side. When she smiled, the scenery around her seemed to brighten up for her. Shan Zihao could not help being dumbfounded. However, once he thought that Yun Jian might really be having an affair with Su Hao Cole's father, his gaze darkened. He wanted to see what kind of person Su Hao Cole's father was. They're here, they're here. Su Hao Cole said excitedly to Yun Yi with his phone in hand. Just as Su Hao Cole was about to look around with his phone, a mature female voice called out. Yun Jian, Su Hao Cole, and the others' head, Su Zetian was slowly walking over with his wife's support. Su Zetian's injuries were much better now. It wouldn't be long before he would be able to fully recover. Dad. Mom. When he saw his father, Luo's father and his mother, his father's and Luo, his mother and Luo, asked for him. In the blink of an eye, Su Zetian and Lin Wanru were already in front of the group. Su Zetian merely nodded at Su Hao Cole. Lin Wanru came over to stroke Su Hao Cole's head with the motherly love of a woman. In spite of it, Su Zetian froze the moment he saw Yun Jian. This scene was seen by Shan Zihao, who was extremely sensitive, and he was taken aback. Was this person Su Hao Cole's father? Moreover, seeing how Su Zetian froze when he saw Yun Jian, Shan Zihao was even more suspicious that there was something going on between them. Just as Shan Zihao thought about it, Su Zetian's surprised voice called out to Yun Jian, Sister Jian? Why are you here? Chapter 866. Just as Su Zetian called out to Sister Jian, Lin Wanru, who was holding his arm and supporting him, turned her head. Lin Wanru was a very virtuous wife. She was very responsible. When she heard that Su Zetian was in trouble, she was scared out of her wits. It was just that Yun Jian saved Su Zetian later. Therefore, Lin Wanru was immensely grateful to Yun Jian. Su Hao Cole's father actually called Yun Jian Sister Jian? Called Yun Jian sister? Why was that? Shan Zihao's impure thoughts were tossed to the back of his mind as he stared blankly. Shan Zihao even wanted to slap himself. Su Hao Cole's father called Yun Jian Sister Jian in such a respectful tone. How could he possibly have an impure relationship with Yun Jian? Moreover, Lin Wanru's subsequent behavior further proved this point. Su Zetian could walk on his own without being helped. Therefore, when Lin Wanru saw Yun Jian, she let go of Su Zetian's hand and went to Yun Jian. Looking at Yun Jian, she spoke to Yun Jian in a very respectful tone. It's you? Do you know my Before Yun Jian could speak, Su Hao Cole was already asking Lin Wanru in confusion, Mom, she's my friend's younger sister. Lin Wanru was already holding Yun Jian's hand in a friendly manner as she looked at Yun Jian and said, I see. I'm really grateful to you back then. I didn't expect you to be the younger sister of my friend. Lin Wanru went on to thank Yun Jian, but other than Su Zetian, everyone else present was baffled and had no idea what was going on. Although the people present were dumbfounded, they could still make out the gist of it. There was a high chance that Yun Jian had helped Lin Wanru and Su Zetian in some big deal. No matter how they guessed, no one would have guessed that Yun Jian was Su Zetian's boss and that it was Yun Jian who had saved Su Zetian from the jaws of death when he was seriously injured. She was practically a lifesaver. Lin Wanru held Yunjian's hand and thanked her profusely. Yunjian nodded nonchalantly until an announcement came from the broadcast. Students, please gather at the competition venue. The foreign language competition is about to begin. Once they heard that, Yun-Yi and Su Hao-Cole hurried to the venue. Dad, Mom, Sister, come with us. The competition is starting. Will be starting in a while. You can watch us from there, explained Su Hao-Cole, and Yun-Yi then led their group to the venue. With Yunjian and Yuns, and they. Yunjian followed them. When they arrived at the competition venue, there were fewer people here than in the junior department, but there was still a lot of traffic. Not long after Yunjian stood there, she caught sight of a familiar face in the blink of an eye. Mr. Peter? She saw that Peter was talking to Headmaster Zhang of Foreign Languages High School in the distance. Principal Zhang of Foreign Languages High School looked very respectful to Peter, and Peter also put his hands behind his back. His skin was delicate, and there was a hint of handsomeness between his eyebrows. His nose was straight, and he looked like a mixed blood. Wasn't Mr. Peter the thief who stole the antiques from Jianghu province last time? What? Did he steal them to the school? Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Peter even put on a serious posture and walked side by side with Headmaster Zhang of Foreign Languages High School. He had just turned a corner when he saw Yunjian, who was looking at him with narrowed eyes. Peter was still striding forward, but when he saw Yunjian, he was so scared that he lost his footing and sprained his left foot. Chapter 867. Peter had been talking to Principal Zhang of Foreign Languages High School in a serious manner just now. Moreover, Peter had been praised by Principal Zhang. Pete, who was still drowning in the praises just now, was flummoxed the moment he saw Yunjian. Peter sprained his ankle, but he did not care about the pain at all. He looked at Yunjian with fear in his eyes, as if he was afraid that Yunjian would charge at him. Meanwhile, Peter said to Principal Zhang, Principal Zhang, I'm leaving now. Let's talk about this next time. Hey, Mr. Peter. Principal Zhang had just opened his mouth when he saw Peter had already turned around and was about to run to the school building. Principal Zhang was a little surprised. Seeing that Peter was about to run to the school building, he was even more suspicious. Why is Mr. Peter running to the school building when he's leaving? Shouldn't he be heading to the school gate? Just as Principal Zhang was thinking about that, a teenage girl around 16 years old suddenly walked up to him. She stood in front of everyone and shouted at Peter's back, Peter, where do you think you're going? Yun-Yi and Su Hao-Cole, who had yet to gather at the competition venue, were stunned. Shan Zihao and Xiao Jiming, who had been on the basketball team since the beginning, were stunned. Ning Lanlan was completely dumbfounded. Su Zetian and his wife, Lin Wanru, were also looking at Yunjian, who was walking toward Peter, with bewilderment. The group of people was dumbfounded as they watched Yunjian call out to Peter. Why is Yunjian calling out to him again? Does he know her? The people present were stunned because of bewilderment. Shan Zihao's eyes narrowed even more when he saw Yunjian taking a step forward to stop Peter. What does she want? However, no matter what, Shan Zihao, felt that his interest in her was growing. Meanwhile, everyone saw Peter stop in his tracks from afar. Peter's feet came to a sudden halt. He wanted to slip away, but Yunjian called out to him. Peter also knew that if he didn't stop, with Yunjian's strength, she would definitely catch up to him. Peter, on the other hand, was one of the best thieves in the world. He was not afraid of anything except Yunjian. The antique that was stolen in Jianghu province last time was recovered by Yunjian. Motherf *Ker, why is she everywhere? Peter slowly turned his head and smiled at Yunjian, but it was a forced and bitter smile. Hey. What a coincidence, we meet again. Peter looked at Yunjian with a smile that was more awkward than crying. If he had known that Yunjian would be here today, he wouldn't have come even if he was beaten to death. No, it's just a coincidence. As Yunjian spoke, she had already arrived in front of Peter. The people watching from afar were a little suspicious. Yunjian was acquainted with this man? Yun-Yi, Su Hao-Cole, Su Zetian, Zhang Zihao, and the others were just thinking about it. Even Principal Zhang was a little confused as to why Peter, who was full of confidence just now, would talk to Yunjian in such a scared tone. Peter suddenly changed his tone. He looked at Yunjian, and in the next second, he clasped his hands together and bent over to look at Yunjian with a comical and begging posture. "Oh my God, I beg you to forgive me. The thing you wanted last time was something I obtained with great difficulty, and I've already given it to you. I really don't have anything on me now, so please let me go, huh? Oh my God, because of you, I'm about to go begging on the streets." Peter, a grown man, actually begged for mercy in front of Yunjian. The people present were confused and shocked. Chapter 868. As an international master thief, Peter's stealing skills were exceptionally high. His nimble skills could be considered as one of the best in the world. It could be said that he had only been robbed twice since he debuted. Both times, it was because of Yunjian. The first time was because of Yunjian in his past life, and the other time was the theft of antiques in Zhe province not long ago. Both times, Yunjian had recovered the stolen items. Peter had promised his employer that he could steal the items, and his employer had even paid a deposit. Because of Yunjian's interference, not only did Peter fail to complete his mission, he even had to pay 10 times the penalty. 10 times the penalty was as high as hundreds of millions of US dollars. Therefore, to Peter, the scariest thing in his life was not encountering a ghost but encountering Yunjian. That was why Peter wanted to slip away the moment he saw Yunjian. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to run into Yunjian here. It was scarier than being caught absent-mindedly in class. "Did you do something bad again?" Yunjian narrowed her eyes at Peter and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Her relaxed posture made Peter's heart clench. "No. How could I? Do I dare?" Peter spoke fluent Chinese, but it wasn't hard to see that Peter was a mixed race. One of his parents was probably from country Z. "Please let me go. I have parents and children to take care of. I really didn't do anything bad this time. Can you do me a favor and not harass me?" Peter's fear of Yunjian had reached a whole new level. He kept calling her Grand Aunt, which made Yunjian dizzy. Yunjian was not here to cause trouble for Peter. She was just surprised to see him here and wanted to go over to greet him. She did not expect Peter to avoid her like the plague, so Yunjian called out to him playfully. "Xiao Jian, what's this?" At this moment, Yun Yi and the others had also followed Yunjian over. They looked at the scene in front of them in shock. "Old friend," Yunjian said readily. "My dear mother, great aunt, I don't dare to be friends with you." Peter was a straightforward person. He made an exaggerated gesture. His fear of Yunjian was exaggerated and comical. Why was he so afraid of Yunjian? Yunjian was not a river beast. Yun Yi and Su Haokol were not the only ones who were shocked. Ning Lanlan, Xiao Jiming, and Shan Zihao, in particular, could not be more stunned. If Yunjian looked so scary, then, just as everyone thought of this, they saw Principal Zhang standing in front of Yunjian. Principal Zhang paused before speaking to Yunjian. "Student, I don't know which school you're from, but I can assure you that Mr. Peter isn't a bad person. Not only am I the principal of Foreign Languages High School, but I'm also the president of Dragon Gate Charity Organization and the director of Huiyan Orphanage. There are too many children in this world who are suffering from despair and pain. They're orphans and have no one to rely on. Some of them can't even feed themselves 3 times a day. Huiyan Orphanage has adopted a large number of such children. They don't have a source of income, so even food and clothing are a problem. In recent years, however, it's Mr. Peter who's donated a large sum of money to Huiyan Orphanage every month to help the children grow up. We and the children are very grateful to him." Chapter 869. Yunjian narrowed her eyes at Principal Zhang's righteous words that were filled with reverence for Peter. She was stunned for 2 seconds as well. Who would have thought that Peter had stolen so many cultural relics and earned so much money just to donate them? It was no wonder Peter looked so pathetic every time. According to what Yun Jian knew, Peter accepted all kinds of missions. With Peter's capability, how could he be so poor that he would accept the lowest level of theft? When Yun Jian saw him in the past, Peter had always made himself poor. Yun Jian was skeptical. Peter was an international thief after all. Where did he spend all the money he earned all these years and spend it all so quickly? He even made himself look like a poor man. Now, Yun Jian knew. You're quite capable. Yun Jian smiled faintly and even flashed her pearly white teeth at Peter. We're old friends. Why don't we go for a walk? Peter was stunned for 2 seconds. Was he seeing things? Did he just see a friendly gaze in Yun Jian's eyes? Oh, okay. For some reason, Peter agreed to Yun Jian's request. Once he agreed, however, he regretted it immediately. He was freaking terrified of Yun Jian. The few times he saw Yun Jian, he was always tortured by Yun Jian. The last time they met, Yun Jian had even snatched the antique he had risked his life to get. Xiao Jian, Zhe and I are going for the competition. They could not forget about the competition. Yunyi looked at Yun Jian. He had no idea how Yun Jian knew Peter, but the latter did not look like a bad guy, so he followed Su Haokol to the competition venue without worry. Shan Zihao and the others were dumbfounded by what they saw. Yun Jian then started chatting with Peter. Su Zetian and Lin Wanru had already followed them to watch Su Haokol's competition. After the few of them left, only Ning Lanlan, Xiao Jiming, and Shan Zihao were left in the area. Principal Zhang also left later because he had something to do. Coincidentally, it wasn't easy for Ning Lanlan and Xiao Jiming to meet each other. The two of them chatted happily. Thus, the only person who stood beside Yun Jian and Peter to listen to their conversation was Shan Zihao. Shan Zihao already had a good impression of Yun Jian. Now that he saw how friendly Yun Jian was with Peter, he felt slightly displeased. But at this moment, Shan Zihao was completely ignored. He could only stand aside and listen. He stood there like a ruffian, but he didn't leave. After Yun Jian and Peter calmed down and chatted for a while, she realized that Peter's character was actually quite good. Especially Peter, after talking to Yun Jian, his fear of Yun Jian was reduced by 2 points. Hey, Grandaunt, so your house is in Longmen City? Peter did not realize that he did not know Yun Jian's name and was still addressing Yun Jian as Grandaunt. I'm Yun Jian. If I hear Grandaunt again, I'll snatch your stuff again, Yun Jian smirked and said as if she was threatening Peter. Damn, Grandaunt, you. No, Yun Jian, don't snatch my stuff. If it weren't for you, I, Peter, would still be the holder of 0 failures in the underworld. I might even be awarded a big prize one day. Peter struck a narcissistic pose and told Yun Jian. Yun Jian and Peter got into the conversation as they chatted. Shan Zihao, on the other hand, had no idea what was going on. He had no idea what Yun Jian and Peter were talking about. Snatch his stuff? What holder of 0 failures in the underworld? Chapter 870. However, the more mysterious Yun Jian became, the more Shan Zihao wanted to dig out Yun Jian's secrets. All in all, Shan Zihao's interest in Yun Jian was growing. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and smiled softly at Peter's amusing words. Not anymore. Yun Jian then looked up at Peter. What about you? Why did you appear in Longmen City? Me. Peter chuckled at the mention of himself and pointed at himself with a smile. My grandma is from Longmen City. I got lost when I was young and spent my time in the orphanage. The hard days in the orphanage weren't even 1,000th of what came after, but to me, the unbearable hunger was the hardest time of my life. Since then, I've donated all the money I earned to the orphanage. Longmen City is my grandma's hometown, of course, I have to give priority to the donation. Peter shrugged and continued in a gloomy tone, actually, my mother came from the Hui'an orphanage. She got sick from starvation when she was young, so she died of cancer at a young age. When I found her home, she was already gone. Only my grandma was left at home, when Peter's grandmother was young, they were poor and had many children. Even food was a problem for the family when they could not afford to eat. Helpless, they could only send Peter's mother to Huiyan orphanage, hoping that she could survive. Huiyan orphanage had little to eat and the children grew up hungry. Peter's mother grew up and became successful. She met Peter's father when she was traveling abroad. Peter's father was from country Y, but Peter's mother insisted on being with him despite the hardships of a foreign relationship. They could have lived happily together as a family. However, Peter's mother fell sick. It was a terminal illness due to starvation in the orphanage when she was young. Peter's mother passed away not long after. Peter's grandmother was a snobbish person. She had always thought that Peter's mother was not good enough for Peter's father. Therefore, when Peter's mother passed away and Peter's father was dispirited, his grandmother sent Peter to an orphanage in country Z. Peter spent an indescribable time in the orphanage. Later on, Peter was taken away by an old master and was taught the old master's lifelong skills of stealing. Through Peter's own hard work, he became the current international thief, Mr. Peter. In fact, Pete was a ZY hybrid. Of course, Peter didn't say that he was a thief in front of Shan Ziheo. He just made a rough summary and summarized the whole story with a similar story. After listening to Peter's story, Yun Jian was slightly shaken. Not to mention Shan Ziheo. At this moment, Shan Ziheo sympathized with Peter. However, it had to be said that Peter was a talent. Perhaps the thieving skills that Peter's master had taught him could only help him become one of the best thieving masters in the country. This had something to do with talent. At the very least, Peter was able to become a world-class master thief because of his own efforts. When Shan Ziheo saw Yun Jian listening to Peter's touching story, he felt that girls would usually cry after hearing such a touching story. However, when Shan Ziheo turned his gaze to Yun Jian, he saw Yun Jian looking at Peter and saying something completely different from what Shan Ziheo had imagined. "Follow me and you can set the salary." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Her confident look surprised Shan Ziheo. Chapter 871. Work with her? What for? What could he do by following her? These were Shan Ziheo's thoughts. Shan Ziheo's current state of mind was indescribable. Yun Jian's actions were getting more mysterious. Of course, the more mysterious Yun Jian was, the more Shan Ziheo's interest in Yun Jian grew. Humans were all despicable, especially those like Shan Ziheo who lived like a prince. In foreign languages high school, Shan Ziheo was no doubt the target of girls' adoration. Not only was he handsome and pleasing to the eyes, but he also had the cool personality that girls liked. It was rare for him to meet a girl like Yun Jian. Not only did Yun Jian ignore him in the beginning, the sense of mystery she exuded had only intensified since the beginning. She brought Ning Lan Lan over the wall, her unusual skills, Su Haokole's father calling her Sister Jian, and the fact that Peter, a mixed blood, was so fearful of her. Shan Ziheo's interest was gradually piqued as he listened to these stories. The more unobtainable something was, the more one wanted to explore it. Shan Ziheo was probably the epitome of this saying. It was then that Peter cried out in shock. "Work with you? I can set my salary? For real?" Peter scanned Yun Jian from head to toe. After all, Yun Jian gave him a terrifying vibe. When Yun Jian robbed him of his stolen items, it was no different from robbing him of his money. Now, Yun Jian was telling him to work with her and set his salary as he pleased. To Peter, he was already extremely lucky that Yun Jian did not steal his things. Now, she was asking him to work for her. "I'm not joking. I just want an answer from you. Do you agree or not?" Yun Jian crossed her arms in front of her chest. She was not in a hurry for Peter's answer. Peter kept quiet for a while. It was only when Yun Jian spoke again that he snapped back to reality. "Of course. As long as you agree, I'll send someone to get you out of Fox Hunters' control immediately." Peter had signed a long-term contract with Fox Hunters. As an international thief, he naturally had a backer. The Fox Hunting Organization was an internationally renowned organization of thieves. The reason why the fox hunting organization was called a thief organization was because it was different from the Hun organization and the kosher mercenaries. The fox hunting organization had a quirk, which was that they only accepted things that their employers wanted to steal or treasures that they wanted to find. Other than that, it never accepted missions that involved killing people. It could be said that the fox hunting organization was the concentration camp for Peter and his group of thieves. Therefore, the fox hunting organization, the Hun organization, and the kosher mercenaries did not have any conflicts of interest. However, Yun Jian knew that Peter had signed a 10-year contract with the fox hunting organization. In other words, for the next 10 years, Peter would work for the fox hunting organization. In other words, for the next 10 years, all the missions he took on would have to go through the fox hunting organization. Furthermore, during this period, half of the money he earned would have to be shared with the fox hunting organization. Under such circumstances, Peter really wanted to get rid of the fox hunting organization. Yun Jian's words were more tempting than anything else. As expected, the moment Yun Jian finished her words, Peter's eyes lit up. He looked at Yun Jian with a very excited gaze. Really? You can really help me get rid of the fox hunting organization? Are you willing to work for me? Yun Jian did not give Peter a definite answer. She only repeated her previous question. Yes, yes, yes. Peter nodded his head like a rattledrum. Shan Zihao, who was standing at the side, saw this. He looked at Yun Jian and Peter with even more shock than before. Chapter 872. Of course, Shan Zihao had never heard of the fox hunting organization. The fox hunting organization was a highly skilled thief organization, but there was something different about it. The fox hunting organization was different from the Hun organization and the kosher mercenaries. The appearance of large organizations like the Hun organization and the kosher mercenaries would cause an uproar. Even organizations like the Hun organization and the kosher mercenaries were often published in the major international newspapers and magazines in Country M. They were listed by many businessmen and politicians as a force to be reckoned with. However, the fox hunting organization was different. Very few people in the underworld knew about the fox hunting organization, and only those collectors who loved collecting antiques would find out about the fox hunting organization's whereabouts. Because the fox hunting organization was only involved in stealing, the members of the organization were only in charge of stealing. Moreover, the fox hunting organization had never been publicized, but it had a place in the international community. In short, those who knew about the fox hunting organization had to have great influence and status in the international community. In other words, if you didn't have power and influence, you wouldn't even know about the existence of the fox hunting organization. Therefore, Yun Jian wasn't afraid to speak about the fox hunting organization in front of Shan Zihao. If it was said that Peter was fearful of Yun Jian at the beginning, then at this moment, he was full of expectations for Yun Jian. He was very much looking forward to Yun Jian helping him break free from the fox hunting organization's control. Moreover, he could tell from the fact that Yun Jian had stolen from the famous thief. Yun Jian definitely wasn't someone who lacked money, so Peter immediately agreed to Yun Jian's request. Okay. Yun Jian seemed to know that Peter would agree to her request, so she just nodded. 2 seconds later, she spoke to Peter in fluent Hindi. 2 days later, report to the kosher mercenaries. Look for the kosher mercenaries' snake. Tell them that it was Yun Jian who told you. Yun Jian spoke to Peter in Hindi, and her sudden change of language stunned Shan Zihao. Then, Yun Jian switched back to Chinese. I believe you can find its address. Of course, she was referring to the kosher mercenaries. Yun Jian pursed her lips into a half-smile. There was an unfathomable sweetness in her smile. Peter obviously understood Hindustani, not to mention that Yun Jian spoke Hindustani for Peter to understand. Furthermore, Yun Jian's main purpose was to prevent Shan Zihao from understanding that sentence. However, after Yun Jian said that sentence, Shan Zihao couldn't figure it out. He looked at the interaction between Yun Jian and Peter and couldn't help but ask Yun Jian, what language were you speaking just now? Why can't I understand what you're saying? Yun Jian glanced at Shan Zihao, who was standing by the side. Only now did she remember that there was someone like Shan Zihao by her side. Hearing Shan Zihao's question, Yun Jian only glanced at him slightly, then calmly replied with 3 words, Hindi. Yun Jian didn't even bother to reply to Shan Zihao. Then, Yun Jian shifted her gaze to Peter. Peter was stunned for a few seconds. Kosha mercenaries? Looking for snake. Lizard? Then what was Yun Jian's identity? Fortunately, Peter was slow enough, so he didn't immediately understand the stakes involved. Okay. Peter nodded and said to Yun Jian. Then I'll leave you to it. I'm going to watch my brother's match, Yun Jian said. Okay. Peter didn't even realize that he had been poached by Yun Jian. He was still thinking about the relationship between Yun Jian and the Kosha mercenaries. Chapter 873. Yun Jian did not come here to poach Peter. She came here to watch Yun Yi's competition. Moreover, Yun Jian did not even know that Peter would be here. However, Yun Jian did not expect that she would be able to poach Peter over just like that. However, she had to admit that this trip was really worth it. After all, Peter was an international master thief. He was one of the top figures in the entire world. For such a big shot like Peter to join the Kosha mercenaries, it was also a way to expand the Kosha mercenaries' strength. After all, those old guys had been eliminated. At this juncture, expanding the strength of the Kosha mercenaries was a path that Yun Jian had to take. The competition has started. Ning Lanlan said to Yun Jian excitedly. Of course, she was not excited because the competition was about to start, but because Xiao Jiming was by her side. Ning Lanlan was dragged by Yun Jian to watch Yun Yi's competition. As Ning Lanlan Sr., Xiao Jiming naturally would not leave. Yun Jian could also feel Ning Lanlan's admiration for Xiao Jiming, so she did not say anything. After Xiao Jiming came over, Shan Zihao followed as well. Yun Jian might not hate Xiao Jiming, but Yun Jian did not like to see Shan Zihao. However, since he was shameless enough to stick to her, Yun Jian could not do anything about it. Peter stood rooted to the spot, dumbfounded. No matter how he racked his brain, he could not figure out the relationship between Yun Jian and Gu Sha mercenaries. It was undeniable that Peter was a little slow. He stood there thinking for a long time before he suddenly remembered. Yun Jian wanted him to join the Kosha mercenaries because she wanted him to join the Kosha mercenaries. However, Yun Jian wanted him to look for Snake. Lizard, Snake. Lizard was the leader of the Kosha mercenaries. What did Yun Jian mean by asking him to find Snake? Lizard? Peter held his forehead with both hands. He shook his head and couldn't stop thinking. What was the relationship between them? If Yun Jian could send him to the Kosha mercenaries, it meant that her position in the Kosha mercenaries was not low. However, if she could order the leader of the Kosha mercenaries, Snake Lizard, to do things for her, it meant that her position was higher than Snake Lizards. If Yun Jian's status was higher than Snake Lizards, then there was only one possibility, then she is. Just as Peter thought of this, he suddenly covered his mouth and widened his eyes in horror. Could she be the legendary person? Just as Peter was thinking about this, Yun Jian, Ning Lanlan, and the others arrived at the arena. Cheers had already begun to erupt from the competition grounds. The intensity of the competition was no less than that of the junior division. Although there were more participants in the junior division than the senior division. Yun Jian darted out from the crowd. She saw Yun Yi from afar at first glance. Yun Yi was the same as Su Hao Cole. Both of them were handsome and tall young men. Hence, Yun Jian could see them from the crowd. The moment Yun Jian walked over, Su Hao Cole saw her first. Su Hao Cole happened to be standing beside Yun Yi. When he saw Yun Jian coming over, Su Hao Cole even poked Yun Yi, who was still looking around. Yun Yi followed Su Hao Cole's gaze and saw Yun Jian standing in the crowd looking at her. Yun Yi turned around and smiled at Yun Jian. Bro, do your best, Yun Jian mouthed silently to Yun Yi. Chapter 874. Yin-Yi and Su Haokol were both very good at speaking English. This time, Yin-Yi and Su Haokol were the representatives of the first senior high school to participate in the competition. Therefore, Yin-Yi's English was better than Su Haokol's. Therefore, Yin-Yi and Su Haokol got very good results in the first round of the competition. After the second round of the competition, the winner was decided. Without a doubt, Yin-Yi was the top student in the middle school. Yin-Yi got the same result as Yunjian. The only difference was that Yunjian was the top student in the middle school section, while Yin-Yi was the top student in the high school section. Su Haokol also got a good result. Although he was not as good as Yin-Yi, he still got the 10th place in the whole high school, which was quite good. After the two competitions were over, the students went back home. Lawson wanted to go out with Yunjian, but he was invited by the school to be the referee, so he had to go back home after the competition. Today was Wednesday, and it was not the weekend yet. Lawson was embarrassed to ask Yunjian to play truant with him, so he had to give up the chance to compete with Yunjian again. Before he left, however, Lawson reminded Yunjian again and again that they would meet again next time. When he was about to leave, Lawson said to Yunjian in English, "Yunjian, the next time we meet, you must let me win." Next time, he did not know if there would be a next time. In spite of it, Yunjian smiled and nodded with pressed lips. And then, in the end, Yunjian added, "The next time we meet, you will still be defeated by me." Yunjian's words were harsh, but this time, they were very encouraging to Lawson. He laughed and said goodbye to Yunjian. As for Ning Lanlan, her new friend, she exchanged contact information with Yunjian and promised to go out together next time. Yunjian had a good impression of Ning Lanlan, so she was happy to be friends with her, so she nodded and agreed. In the end, Shan Zihao watched as Yunjian took the bus back to Longmen No. 1 High School. Since he had a good impression of Yunjian, he could only watch her leave. However, Shan Zihao was not willing to give up just like that. It was rare for him to like a girl, so how could he give up before pursuing her? Moreover, Xiao Jiming was his buddy, and Xiao Jiming was close with Ning Lanlan. Now that Ning Lanlan was close to Yunjian, as long as he held on to Ning Lanlan, he was not afraid that he could not catch up to Yunjian. A week passed by quickly. It was Friday in the blink of an eye. Yunjian carried her backpack and walked out of the school. In the past, with Chen Sini and Zhang Xiaofeng accompanying her, the journey from the teaching building to the school gate was filled with laughter. However, without the two clowns, Yunjian felt empty in her heart, and it was not a good feeling. However, when she recalled Chen Sini's father inviting her to his house for dinner last week, Yunjian felt relieved. This meant that she would be able to meet Chen Sini. Yunjian then hurried home. She would not be having dinner at home today. Yunjian returned to Dong Ruan's villa, tossed her backpack into her room, and went downstairs. She was going to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner today. As Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's wedding was getting closer, Qin Yiru would definitely move to Gu Yunjian's house if they got married. Hence, Qin Yiru had already started moving her things. They had already agreed on tonight. Qin Yiru brought Xiao Yunju and the other two to Gu Yunjian's house, intending to enjoy a table of delicious food. Chapter 875. Yunjian had just reached the middle of the staircase when she felt Ce standing behind her. "I'm going to Officer Ge's house for dinner." Yunjian could feel Ce standing behind her. She pursed her red lips and said. Before Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru got married, Yunjian had always addressed Gu Junjian as Officer Gu. After all, once Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru were legally married, it would only be reasonable for Yunjian to address Gu Junjian as Dad. Yunjian knew that Ce didn't know that they were going to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner today. Hence, she turned her head and looked at him with her big black eyes. "Mom told us that we'll go to Officer Ge's house for dinner after school." Yunjian added, "My brother will be there too. Adam and Lan Su will be there too. You can come with me." There was no one at home. Everyone was rushing to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner. Yun Jian didn't expect CE to be back at this time because he was usually at an Hun organization from Monday to Friday. Emichim, CE's honest voice sounded. His handsome face was slowly leaning towards Yun Jian. So you're saying that there's no one at home now? CE's warm breath surrounded Yun Jian. This made Yun Jian feel a tingling sensation. Emichim, Yun Jian didn't think too much about it. She turned around and was about to go downstairs when she said to CE, let's go over quickly too. My mom said that we should come early tonight. Otherwise, the food will get cold. Ever since she bought phones for Qin Yiru and Yun Yi, it was very convenient for Yun Jian to contact them. Upon hearing Yun Jian say that there was no one at home, CE's eyes flashed. Just as Yun Jian was about to turn around and head downstairs, CE suddenly grabbed her wrist. Yun Jian was stunned, but she didn't think too much about it. Let's hurry over. Before she could finish her sentence, CE suddenly pulled Yun Jian over. He pulled Yun Jian to the stairs and blocked her with his muscular body. Like a cabotin, he pinned Yun Jian against the wall of the stairs. Yun Jian was shocked and wanted to say something, but CE ruthlessly squeezed her words out. Her lips were tightly shut as she tossed and turned. CE was panting heavily as he kissed Yun Jian. Yun Jian shuddered from the kiss. Coupled with CE's steady breathing, her emotions were in a mess. Just as Yun Jian was about to suffocate, CE let go of her. At the same time, Yun Jian was looking away from the corner of her eyes. CE was tall. He was one step lower than Yun Jian, but he was still about half a head taller than Yun Jian. CE extended his slender arms to hold Yun Jian's head and gently moved Yun Jian in front of him to look into his eyes. Xiao Jian, what should I do? You're so beautiful. I don't want anyone to see your beauty. CE looked at Yun Jian affectionately. After a while, CE held Yun Jian's head again and inched closer. Yun Jian knew that CE must have known about Shan Ziheo's love for her. CE was not around when it happened, but he would know if Yun Jian made any noise. When their lips were about to touch, Yun Jian felt CE's breath filling her. He looked at her with his dark eyes and said, I really want to imprison you under me. As he spoke, he pressed his lips against hers. Chapter 876. Yun Jian's eyes instantly lit up. At the same time, CE's mischievous hand had already gently slid across Yun Jian's flat stomach. Their lips were still pressed together. CE's lips carried a faint fragrance. Yun Jian didn't hate it. Instead, she was looking forward to it. However, when CE's hand reached under Yun Jian's clothes, Yun Jian could no longer pretend that she didn't see anything. She quickly reached out and pressed down on CE's mischievous hand. Her eyes widened. However, this didn't seem to be able to stop CE's hand. CE's hand slid past Yun Jian's clothes and broke through Yun Jian's resistance. He slid along Yun Jian's beautiful body and slid into her bra. His hand covered her left breast. Yun Jian's entire body went numb. Just as she was about to pull his hand away, she felt CE's lips on hers become even more unbridled. Yun Jian's lips were sealed. Her lips couldn't move. She pressed against CE's chest with her hand, as if she wanted to push CE away so that his hand would leave her body. However, CE didn't release his hand. Looking at Yun Jian in front of him, he felt that she was even more alluring. His large hand even caressed her a little and gently grabbed her. Yun Jian had never been so close to a certain part of her body. She couldn't help but groan. However, her eyes were wide open. The blush on her face was a sign of her shyness at this moment. Just as Yun Jian was about to suffocate, CE finally let go of Yun Jian's lips. However, at the same time, he used his other hand to grab a certain part of her butt. Yun Jian's entire body shuddered as she felt the soft sensation of her forbidden area being touched. Yun Jian almost groaned again. Let go. Let go. In the next second, Yun Jian, who had regained her right to speak, slapped CE's hand a few times. However, to Ce, it didn't hurt at all. At this moment, Ce had already leaned over to Yunjian's ear. At this moment, one of Ce's legs was shorter than Yunjian's, while the other leg was on the same position as Yunjian's. Even so, he was still taller than Yunjian by half a head. At this moment, Ce had already bent down and pressed his lips against Yunjian's earlobe, where her collarbone was. "Xiao Jian, you're so beautiful," Ce moaned softly. Right after that, he pressed his lips against Yunjian's neck even more brazenly. His domineering and possessive voice rang again. "Next time, you're not allowed to be so close to other guys. If they pester you, you're not allowed to be within 3 meters of them either." As he spoke, Ce's handsome lips curled up slightly. If anyone present saw how Ce looked right now, they would definitely be mesmerized by his demeanor. His flawless and absolutely possessive handsome face was enough to make people infatuated just by recalling his handsome face. "If you don't listen to me next time, then..." Ce had already moved his lips back to Yunjian's earlobe. With a smirk, he uttered his final words, "Then I'll make you mine right away. Right away. Right away." God knew how much he wanted this girl in front of him. However, once he recalled his promise to Qin Yiru, it looked like he was going to have to break his promise. It was impossible for him to wait until Yunjian came of age. Yunjian was dazed by Ce's words, but her cheeks were burning. She had never been treated like this before, but if someone else had told her this, Yunjian would not have felt anything. Chapter 877. In spite of it, Ce's naughty hand was still glued to Yunjian's plump breasts when he said that. His other hand was on one of her buttocks. Both of his actions made Yunjian blush uncontrollably. Strangely, this new and entirely different feeling did not make Yunjian feel disgusted. Instead, she was looking forward to what he was going to do next. Yunjian was shocked by her own thoughts. Shaking her head, she bit her lip lightly and tossed the thought to the back of her mind. "Xiao Jian, are you back? Why didn't you close the door? What if a stray dog came in?" Yin Yi's voice came from the door. It was a villa and was surrounded by places that only the rich could afford to live in. However, there were plenty of stray dogs and domesticated dogs nearby. Some time ago, because the owner of a nearby villa forgot to close the door, a stray dog ran into his house. After the stray dog ran into his house, the owner of the villa returned home and saw it. Naturally, he wanted to drive the stray dog away. However, the dog became arrogant when it was chased by the owner and bit him. The owner went to the hospital to get a rabies vaccine. In the end, he received news that the stray dog died not long after. The reason was that the stray dog had contracted rabies. Rabies was a very scary virus. When one was bitten by a dog and was not treated in time and the dog happened to be infected with rabies, the person who was bitten would be infected with the disease. Of course, those who went to the hospital for a rabies vaccine before the disease acted up were usually fine. Once it did, however, there was no one in the world who could be saved, let alone getting a rabies vaccine. Some people did not have a strong immune system and died from the rabies vaccine after being bitten. Moreover, people who were infected with rabies would usually die within a few months. The owner of the villa was bitten when he chased the dog away, so he went to get a rabies vaccine immediately. However, the prevention was not in place and he contracted rabies as well. He died in less than a month. The incident stirred up a storm in Longmen City. Those who heard the news were terrified. Therefore, recently, it was popular to close the door after returning home. Therefore, when Yin Yi came back and saw that the door was not closed, she said, "Don't worry." Suddenly hearing Yin Yi's voice and seeing Si Yi's hands on her unspeakable parts, Yun Jian's face turned red as if it had been dyed with blood. Her face was so red that she couldn't bear to let go. Si Yi looked at Yun Jian. His eyes were filled with obsession, making it impossible for anyone to ignore his existence. "Xiao Jian? Aren't you at home?" At this moment, Yun Yi had already walked in from the main entrance. Si Yi also let go of her hand immediately. It was an exciting game. She was so close to being seen by Yun-yi. Yun-jian's eyes were unbelievably red. Yun-yi was already at the door. He did not suspect anything when he saw Ce and Yun-jian standing on the stairs. "Xiao Jian, why aren't you answering? The door has to be closed in time. There are a lot of stray dogs now and rabies is at its peak," Yun-yi said. Chapter 878. "I know, Gu. I'll be more careful next time." Yun-jian's voice was soft and carried a sense of tenderness. Of course, this was only Ce's opinion. Yun-jian lowered her gaze as well. Yun-jian was good at adjusting her emotions. She recovered quickly and looked at Yun-yi, saying, "Gu, let's go to Officer Ge's house for dinner today. Mom mentioned it before." "Do you know?" Other than the blush on Yun-jian's cheeks, she had completely recovered. It was unknown if she had covered it up well or if it was natural. "I know. Mom already called me," Yun-yi replied and patted his pants pocket, indicating that there was a phone inside. Qin Yiru and Yun-yi now had the phones Yun-jian bought for them. Yun-yi could contact Qin Yiru normally even if she stayed in school. "I'll put my bag in my room. Let's go over quickly." "Don't let them wait too long," Yun-yi said and headed upstairs. When they passed by the stairs where Yun-jian and Ce were, Yun-yi glanced at Yun-jian suspiciously before looking at Ce. Something felt off about the atmosphere. In spite of it, Yun-yi did not dwell on it. He bypassed Yun-jian and Ce naturally and went to the second floor. It was only when Yun-yi went to the second floor that Yun-jian breathed a sigh of relief. She then turned to go downstairs, ignoring Ce for the time being. He was getting bolder. It was the same when they went for a barbecue last time. It was the same at home now. If she continued to take it, would he not? Yun-jian did not continue thinking about it. She stepped on the stairs and smoothed her clothes gently. "Xiao Jian." Watching Yun-jian run to the first floor, Ce's starry eyes flashed. In the next second, he called out to Yun-jian in a gentle and soft voice. Ce admitted that he had never spoken to anyone in such a gentle tone. He would kill anyone who pissed him off. It was definitely not a casual remark. This could be seen from the things that had happened back then. However, he was more patient and attentive to Yun-jian than he had ever been. He could treat Yun-jian with the most gentle side. Seeing that Yun-jian was ignoring him, Ce went downstairs with a smile. Ce's legs were long, so he caught up to Yun-jian in a few steps and grabbed Yun-jian's wrist. After grabbing Yun-jian's wrist, he moved his hand down and interlaced his fingers with Yun-jian's. It was then that an awkward cough came from the stairs leading from the first floor to the second floor. Cough, cough, cough. It was obvious that Yun-yi had seen Ce's actions from the stairs. Just as Yun-yi's cough was heard, Yun-yi was already on the first floor. He did not look at Ce and Yun-jian but coughed twice before telling Ce, "Brother-in-law, let's go." He was thrilled to be called brother-in-law. So what if Ce was older than him? In the end, he still had to be called brother-in-law by him. Hee hee. Yun-yi snickered and pretended to be serious as he walked out of the house. When Ce heard Yun-yi call him brother-in-law, he was in a good mood again. Then, he held Yun-jian's hand and walked out. Gu Yunjian's house and Dong Ruan's house were in different places. However, Gu Yunjian's house and Dong Ruan's house were both villas. Not everyone could afford to live in these villas. However, it was a long journey from Dong Ruan's house to Gu Yunjian's house. Chapter 879. Gu Junjian also lived in a villa area. The villa area here was much larger than the villa area where Dong Ruan's family lived, and it was surrounded by trees. At a glance, other villas could not be seen. There were also some overall facilities. Compared to Dong Ruan's villa, it was much better. If one had to ask why, it was because the villas here were only sold to people who had made contributions to the country. Perhaps it was an order from the higher-ups, so the land in this area could only be sold to people who had made great contributions to the country. Gu Junjian was undoubtedly one of the best candidates. In addition, Gu Yunjian's family was very rich. Therefore, it was very reasonable for him to want to buy a villa here. Are you sure it's here? Yin Yi was shocked when she arrived at the gate. The iron gate in front of her was already as big as the school gate. Looking in from the gate, the villa was filled with flower beds and surrounded by green trees. Looking from the gate, she could not see the villa at all. However, this also reflected that Gu Yunjian's family was extraordinarily big. Perhaps compared to Dong Ruan's family, Gu Yunjian's family was many times bigger. Therefore, Yin Yi was immediately stunned. Yun Jian and Ce had seen villas that were hundreds or thousands of times better than this, so naturally, they were not surprised. Hello, are you young Master Yun Yi and Miss Yun Jian? At this moment, an old man sitting in the guardhouse at the gate walked out and asked Yun Jian and Yin Yi respectfully. This old man had been guarding the gate here for decades. He had been here since Gu Junjian bought this villa. This old man's surname was Ding. Uncle Ding had been guarding here since Gu Junjian and his ex-wife got married. Before Yun Jian and Yun Yi came, Uncle Ding had been instructed by Gu Junjian not to block Yun Jian and Yun Yi at the gate when they came over. We are. Yun Yi nodded politely at Uncle Ding. Then come in. Uncle Ding quickly ran over to open the door. Once the door opened, Yun Jian and the other two walked in. There were many flowers and plants in the villa. It took about 5 to 6 minutes to walk from the gate to the villa. This is it. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Then, she, Ce, and Yun Yi walked into the house. The gate of the villa was not closed, so Yun Jian and the other two were able to walk in easily. Just as they entered, they saw Qin Yiru coming out with 2 plates of dishes. When she saw Yun Jian and the others, she could not help greeting them, "Ae. Xiao Jian, Xiao Yi, you're all here. Sit down, it's time to eat." As she spoke, Qin Yiru carried the remaining 2 plates of dishes to the dining table. There was a long dining table in front of them. Xiao Yunju, Ce, Lan Su, Adam, and Mo Sen were already seated. Even Gu Junjian was already waiting there. Seeing Yun Jian and the others, Adam even moved his lips. They're here, they're here. They're finally here. Let's eat. Shuang had already returned to Anhun group. Unlike Adam and Mo Sen, Shuang was Anhun's social leader. All of Anhun's missions and external dealings were handled by Shuang in place of Ce. Compared to Adam and Mo Sen, Shuang did not have much free time. Chapter 880. The group sat down around the long table. The table was rather long but not ridiculously long. It was set up so that one could reach out and take a bite of the food. Even if there were a lot of people, they could still sit down. Right, Xiao Yi, Xiao Jian said that you got first place in the foreign language competition in high school too. Qin Yiru asked Yun Yi when everyone was seated around the table. Yun Jian had already told Qin Yiru about what happened this Wednesday. The foreign language competition was announced by the school out of the blue and Yun Yi was a boarding student, so he had just returned home. Therefore, it was Yun Jian who told Qin Yiru that Yun Yi had won first place in high school. Hearing that her son and daughter had won first place in the city's foreign language competition in middle school and high school respectively, Qin Yiru was overwhelmed with pride. As their mother, how could Qin Yiru not feel proud? Although she had heard from Yun Jian that Yun Yi had won first place in high school's foreign language competition, Qin Yiru wanted to hear it from her son in person. "Emin, I got first place in the competition this time," Yun Yi answered when he heard his mother's question. Xiao Jian and Xiao Yi are smart kids indeed. Gu Junjian guffawed, the pride on his face unmistakable. Although Gu Junjian was not Yun Yi and Yun Jian's biological father, both children were actually much closer to Gu Junjian than their biological father, Yun Yi. Gu Junjian was especially nice to Qin Yiru. It's all because of the children's hard work. It's my blessing to have these 2 children. Qin Yiru chuckled with a hand covering her mouth, but the smile on her face did not diminish. Compared to Qin Yiru and Gu Yunjian's friendliness, Adam never stopped talking. This was mainly because Qin Yiru's cooking was too delicious, so Adam didn't even have the time to stop and speak. Is there anyone who eats like you? Your legs have just recovered. If you become crippled, I won't be responsible for helping you. Lan Su was sitting beside Adam. Seeing the way Adam ate, she couldn't help but say something to him. I'm not. My leg still hurts. I got hurt because of you, so you have to support me. When Adam heard that Lan Su wasn't going to support him, he didn't even have the energy to eat the drumstick in his hand. He immediately threw it into the bowl. That aggrieved look made it seem as if Adam was a little wife who had been bullied by Lan Su. Come on, eat your food. You even wanted to fight with me yesterday. Where did that energy go? Mo-san glared at Adam and blindly spoke the truth. Ha! Adam also laughed awkwardly, looking as if he was a little embarrassed. Chi. At this moment, the sound of several sports cars drifting by suddenly sounded at the door. Someone came in? After all, Uncle Ding was guarding the door, so ordinary people shouldn't be able to come in. However, the sound of these sports cars drifting by and stopping at the front door of the villa was so eye-catching. Who came? I'll go take a look. Gu Junjian frowned slightly. Then he stood up and was about to walk out. Okay. Qin Yiru nodded. The moment Gu Junjian stood up from the dining chair, a group of people suddenly walked in through the door of the villa. The leader was a man in his 20s. The man had dyed his hair red, yellow, blue, and green. His short hair had all kinds of colors. It was obvious that it was dyed. However, if one looked at it directly, they would be able to see that the man in the lead had similar eyebrows to Gu Junjian. Chapter 881. Gu Junjian was slightly stunned when he saw Gu Xian. After hearing Gu Yunjian's words, coupled with Gu Yunjian's reaction, and the fact that Gu Xian and Gu Junjian looked like they were carved from the same mold, everyone present had an idea of what was going on based on these few points alone. This Gu Xian was most likely the son of Gu Junjian and his ex-wife. Qin Yiru recognized him at first glance. Moreover, Qin Yiru had heard from Gu Junjian that his son with his ex-wife was called Gu Xian. Now that she heard Gu Junjian call the man with dyed red, yellow, blue, and green hair, Xian, she could immediately confirm that he was Gu Yunjian's son. Yunjian could naturally guess as well. However, at this moment, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Ha! The atmosphere became more and more oppressive. At this moment, Gu Xian, who was standing there, suddenly let out a cold chuckle. This chuckle, coupled with Gu Xian's hair, gave people the first impression that he was a hooligan that was not to be trifled with. By the time everyone turned to look at Gu Xian, he was already slowly making his way over. Gu Xian not only dyed his hair stylishly, but he also dressed very fashionably. Qin Yiru's heart skipped a beat when she saw his tattered pants and his roguish sneer. Junjian, this is Xian, right? Qin Yiru turned to ask Gu Junjian to ease the awkward atmosphere. Qin Yiru had already changed her way of addressing Gu Junjian. She no longer called him Officer Gu. Qin Yiru simply wanted to use Gu Yunjian's introduction to greet Gu Xian. For Qin Yiru, it was her principle to behave properly. Gu Junjian nodded in tacit agreement. Little Xian, this is yours. Gu Junjian had just finished his sentence when Gu Xian interrupted him. Haha. What? You're not happy to see me back, right? You didn't even inform me in advance that you're getting married, did you? Gu Xian's voice was a little strange. It was filled with mockery and ridicule. Gu Junjian did not tell Gu Xian that he was going to get married. That was because Gu Junjian had always known that his divorce with his ex-wife was a huge blow to Gu Xian. That was why Gu Xian chose to study abroad. That was why Gu Xian would rather stay abroad than spend the new year with his biological father. However, Gu Junjian wasn't trying to hide it. On the contrary, Gu Junjian didn't know how to break the news to Gu Xian. Of course, during this period, Gu Junjian had been thinking about how to break the news to Gu Xian that he was going to marry another wife. That was why Gu Junjian kept delaying it. However, on the day of the actual wedding, Gu Junjian would of course inform his own son. However, from Gu Xian's point of view, the meaning of this was very different. When his father divorced his mother, it was done without a word. He didn't care about him at all. When parents divorced, no one was more upset than the child. Regarding this matter, Gu Xian had always held a grudge in his heart. However, what did he see when he came in today? Gu Junjian was happily chatting with his new wife. Did he ever think about his own son? Xian, it's not what you think, Gu Junjian still wanted to say something, but before Gu Junjian could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. Gu Xian shouted at Gu Junjian emotionally, if it's not what I think, then what is it? Gu Junjian, you've been seduced by a vixen, right? You don't even want your own son anymore. As Gu Xian spoke, he pointed at Qin Yiru and shouted at Gu Junjian. Chapter 882. Just as Gu Xian spoke up to this point, a bowl was suddenly slammed onto the table. When the bowl was slammed onto the table, it immediately made a loud noise. Bang! Everyone present was frightened by the loud noise in front of them, and their souls shrank fiercely. Of course, this excluded Ce, Adam, Mo Sen, Lan Su, and Yun Yi. As for Gu Xian and the group of people who came in with Gu Xian, they were all shocked. Gu Xian didn't come back alone. He came back with a group of friends. There were about 3 or 4 of Gu Xian's friends, and one of them was a tall and strong foreigner. The others were from country Z. These were all Gu Xian's friends and classmates from his overseas school. When he heard from others that his father was getting married, Gu Xian practically rushed back from abroad with a few of his good buddies. However, just as Gu Xian accused Qin Yiru of marrying him for Gu Yunjian's money, Yun Jian slammed the bowl in her hand onto the table with a loud bang. It had to be said that Gu Xian had crossed Yun Jian's bottom line. And Yun Jian's bottom line was Qin Yiru. If Gu Xian hadn't insulted Qin Yiru, then Yun Jian naturally wouldn't have done anything. However, the problem was that Gu Xian had actually accused Qin Yiru of being a woman who got close to Gu Junjian for money. This was something that Yun Jian couldn't tolerate. Just as Gu Xian and Gu Xian's friends were stunned by Yun Jian's actions, Yun Jian's sharp words rang out. I dare you to say that again. Yun Jian's words carried a power that made it impossible for people not to be afraid, but at least Gu Xian and Gu Xian's friends were shocked. After coming back to his senses, Gu Xian looked at Yun Jian, who stood up from the dining chair. He pretended to be bold and looked back at Yun Jian. Gu Xian gritted his teeth. He immediately looked at Yun Jian with an imposing manner and replied, Who are you? What does my family's business have to do with you? Gu Xian hadn't been obedient all these years. Gu Yunjian's divorce with his ex-wife was a huge blow to him, so Gu Xian had been living a leisurely life abroad these years. In his free time, he had befriended a group of hooligan-like buddies. Therefore, Gu Xian's tone was a little boastful. I'm not anyone. Your family's future has nothing to do with me, and I'm not interested in your family's future at all, Yun Jian said. Yun Jian paused. Then her eyes suddenly became sharp, and those sharp eyes carried an irresistible courage. But the person you insulted just now is my mother. I don't care about your family's business, but if you insult my mother, then I won't allow it. Yun Jian said word by word. Her words carried an irresistible authority. Even Gu Junjian wanted to speak up for Yun Jian. Others might not know, but how could Gu Junjian not know? Not only did Yun Jian have several identities now, more importantly, she was the boss of the internationally renowned Kosha mercenaries. How could the boss of Kosha mercenaries, the mother of slaying God, the world's top secret agent, be someone who lacked money? Who knows if it's an insult or not? Maybe your mom got close to my dad for money. Gu Xian hated Gu Junjian now, so he did not have a good opinion of Yun Jian and Qin Yiru. Xian, don't spout nonsense. Xiao Jian is your younger sister from now on. Gu Junjian could not help growling at his son. Chapter 883. However, Gu Junjian did not yell at Gu Xian because in Gu Yunjian's opinion, he had already let his son down. Gu Junjian himself admitted that he had been busy with military affairs and had paid little attention to his family. Gu Yunjian's ex-wife had run away with another man and divorced him because of this. It was also because of this that Gu Xian deeply hated his biological father, Gu Junjian. Therefore, when Gu Xian wanted to study abroad, and when Gu Xian wanted to do a series of things, including making a group of bad friends, Gu Junjian did not participate too much. This was because Gu Junjian felt that he had let Gu Xian down. Even when they were young, Gu Junjian had always listened to Gu Xian and had never insulted him. If it were not for Gu Xian's outrageous words, Gu Junjian would not have spoken to Gu Xian in such a tone. All these years, his father had never insulted him, but because of Qin Yiru, he had insulted him. Gu Xian looked at him in disbelief. You've changed. You never said that to me before. Gu Xian looked at Gu Junjian with hatred. He was not even willing to call him dad. To Gu Xian, Gu Junjian had never cared about his family before. After his mother cheated on him, Gu Junjian divorced his biological mother without saying a word. Since he was young, he had been more miserable than others. Therefore, Gu Xian felt that he should enjoy Gu Yunjian's apology. He should make Gu Junjian regret it. In fact, there were many people who had the same idea as Gu Xian. Gu Xian had turned himself into a hooligan, or perhaps it was because he had fallen from grace. In fact, he had only done this for one thing. He wanted Gu Junjian to regret it. He wanted Gu Junjian to see what he had done in the past. He wanted his son to become the kind of person he should not be. Gu Xian had become like this because of Gu Junjian. As expected, it's just like what others say. When a mistress enters the family, everything is decided by the mistress. I won't acknowledge such a shameless vixen. I don't have a sister. My parents only gave birth to me. Gu Xian roared at Gu Junjian. His eyes were filled with hatred. Shut up. After Gu Xian roared, Gu Junjian did not wait for Yun Jian to make a move. He grabbed the bowl in his hand and threw it at Gu Xian. This was the first time Gu Junjian had been so angry and hit Gu Xian. Gu Xian's words completely enraged Gu Junjian. Gu Xian called Qin Yiru a vixen. To be honest, Gu Junjian could not hold it in anymore. Qin Yiru was the person Gu Junjian had decided on. In other words, Gu Junjian had already decided that Qin Yiru would be the person who would share the joys and sorrows of his life with him. Therefore, even his son, who he had always tolerated, would not allow him to insult her like this. Ping 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 pang pang. The bowl was thrown at Gu Xian in an arc Gu Xian did not dodge. He watched as Gu Junjian threw the bowl at him, and finally, the rice in the bowl was thrown at him. The person who was smashed was stunned for a moment. He had always thought that his father, Gu Junjian, would tolerate him in the future because of his guilt. However, ever since he walked into the house and saw Gu Junjian chatting and eating with Qin Yiru and the others, Gu Xian felt that he no longer belonged to this family. He felt that he was very pitiful and miserable. Gu Junjian, you will regret this. Gu Xian glared at Gu Junjian fiercely. After he finished speaking, he ran out without even looking at his friends. Chapter 884. In that situation, Gu Xian's friends didn't say anything. After all, it was their family matter. However, when they saw Gu Xian rush out without looking back, Gu Xian's friends also ran out. It wasn't easy for the child to come back. Even if he said something unpleasant, you shouldn't treat him like this. The child is still young. Some things can be discussed slowly. Qin Yiru's hands were tightly clasped together. She stood up hesitantly and spoke to Gu Junjian. Qin Yiru was very kind. Even if Gu Xian had insulted her and called her a vixen, Qin Yiru wasn't angry. Of course, Qin Yiru wasn't the kind of person who liked to be bullied. However, she understood how big of a blow a child's parents' divorce was. Back then, Qin Yiru didn't want to divorce Yun Gang because she was afraid that Yun Jian and Yun Yi wouldn't be able to accept it. If one were to ask Qin Yiru why she understood this kind of rebellious mentality, it was because Dong Ruan's parents had divorced long ago. Dong Ruan often complained to her about this. When Dong Ruan's parents divorced, it was a big blow to Dong Ruan and Siyi's mother. Especially Dong Ruan. She studied so hard when she was young because she wanted to be strong. However, Qin Yiru knew that Dong Ruan's parents' divorce was no different from the sky falling down on her. Especially after Dong Ruan's parents reorganized their families, Dong Ruan became an outsider in that family. Although Dong Ruan's parents were rich and Dong Ruan had never lacked financial love, to Dong Ruan, without family love, it was as if she had lost everything in life. Qin Yiru didn't want Yun Jian and Yun Yi to become like that, so she didn't divorce Yun Gang. However, since Yun Jian and Yun Yi didn't think that way and Yun Gang cheated, Qin Yiru decided to go all out and divorce Yun Gang. I'll go check on him. Qin Yiru was overflowing with maternal love. She was a kind person, so when she saw Gu Xian running out, she stood up and chased after him. Gu Junjian held his forehead with his hand, a look of despair and pain on his face. It was not that Gu Junjian did not expect Gu Xian to hate him, but what could he do? What could he do? Seeing Qin Yiru run out, Yun Jian was worried that she would be bullied by Gu Xian. Therefore, Yun Jian also stood up. She said to the few people present and then followed Qin Yiru out. I'll go take a look too. After Yun Jian finished speaking, she left the dining chair and walked out of the door. Yun Jian knew that it would be very awkward for Gu Junjian to go out in this situation, especially when Gu Xian was still angry. However, if Qin Yiru went out alone, Yun Jian was afraid that Qin Yiru would be bullied. Just as Yun Jian stood up, Ce stood up at the same time. He did not say anything and followed Yun Jian out of the door. On the other side, Gu Xian simply rushed out of the door. Unknowingly, it had started to drizzle outside the door. Gu Xian plunged into the rain, but he did not feel cold or chilly at all. He had been waiting for his mother to come back, to reconcile with his father, and for the family to be reunited. However, all of this was shattered. When he saw Gu Junjian happily with Qin Yiru and the others, he suddenly felt that he could not fit in with this family. Was his existence superfluous? Xian. A few of Gu Xian's friends rushed out and grabbed Gu Xian. At that moment, Gu Xian was on the verge of collapse. He looked like a dying man on the brink of death. Chapter 885. Xian, it's not easy for you to come home. Don't be angry with your father. Come home with me, okay? Qin Yiru said gently as she walked over. As she spoke, Qin Yiru even reached out to help Gu Xian. However, Gu Xian saw Qin Yiru's hand coming towards him from the corner of his eye, and his heart was filled with hatred. Get lost. Hypocrite, who allowed you to call me Xian? Disgusting, don't touch me. As Gu Xian spoke, he reached out and slapped away Qin Yiru's hand that was reaching towards Gu Xian. Qin Yiru sincerely reached out to help Gu Xian, but who knew that when Gu Xian slapped her, Qin Yiru would take 2 steps back. It took her a long time to stabilize her feet, but because her left foot accidentally twisted, she fell into a puddle. Ah! Qin Yiru shrieked before her feet gave way and she fell into a puddle that was filled by the drizzle. You vixen! Who told you to be hypocritical and bully Xian? Go to hell! A guy standing next to Gu Xian saw Qin Yiru fall into the puddle, so he directly walked over and lifted his foot. It looked like he was going to kick Qin Yiru. This guy from Gu Xian was dressed like a rich man, and the arrogance on his face could not be described with words. Arrogant, conceited, these were all enough to describe this guy. Shenjia, stop. Seeing that his friend was about to step on Qin Yiru for him, Gu Xian looked at Qin Yiru, who fell to the ground, and looked at Qin Yiru's face that was slightly old due to overwork, and he unconsciously shouted. However, Guxian's friend did not listen to Guxian's words, and this guy called Shenjia still stepped on Qin Yiru. F***CKU, mistress, bitch. Go to hell, bitch. Shenjia did not listen to his advice, and when Guxian reached out to stop him, Shenjia's foot had already landed on Qin Yiru's body. Qin Yiru had already accidentally fallen into the puddle, and now she was still angry after being kicked by Shenjia. At this time, Yun Jian just happened to see this scene from the door, and she did not expect to see this scene at all. When she saw Shenjia kick Qin Yiru's abdomen, Yun Jian growled, "Mom," and immediately rushed towards Qin Yiru. Gu Junjian, who was sitting in the room, was still holding his head with an embarrassed expression. At this time, he suddenly heard Yun Jian's growl, and he suddenly stood up. What happened? What happened? Gu Junjian said as he stood up from the table, and he rushed towards the door. Gu Junjian believed in his son, Guxian's character. Although Guxian's words were unpleasant, he would not do such a crazy thing. Gu Junjian quickly thought of Guxian's brothers. Could it be, on this side, Shenjia kicked Qin Yiru's abdomen fiercely. Shenjia wanted to lift his leg to kick Qin Yiru again, but he was stopped by Guxian. F***CK, Guxian, what are you doing? Why do you care about this mistress? He might as well kill her directly. I'm trying to help you. Shenjia said confidently. Guxian did not know why, but when he looked at Qin Yiru's face, which was obviously overworked and slightly old, his heart tightened. What the hell, he actually pitied this mistress who was about to steal his father away. However, Guxian could not help but take 2 steps towards Qin Yiru. Chapter 886. Qin Yiru was already old, and after being kicked by Shenjia, she was a little dizzy. Because of overwork these years, Qin Yiru's body had some sequelae. However, Shenjia didn't care about this. For a rich young master like him, he could kick whoever he wanted, and he never cared about it. And now, Shenjia watched as Guxian extended his hand to help Qin Yiru up. He stood behind Guxian and laughed wildly, and even mocked Guxian. Guxian, are you stupid? That's a mistress. She wants to marry your dad and take away your dad's love, and you actually went to help her. I helped you kick her twice, and that's already letting her off easy, you. At this time, Guxian had already helped Qin Yiru up. However, at the same time, Shenjia, who was laughing wildly behind Guxian and mocking Guxian for helping Qin Yiru up, suddenly felt a gust of wind coming from behind him. In the next second, he felt as if someone had kicked him hard in the waist. By the time Shenjia reacted, the heavy kick had already landed on his waist. Being kicked in the waist from behind, Shenjia instinctively wanted to stand firm. However, the powerful force behind the kick sent Shenjia crashing to the ground. Guxian was supporting Qin Yiru, and Shenjia had his back facing them. Only the other 2 buddies of Guxian were watching from the side. However, at this moment, they saw a horrifying scene. They saw Yun Jian madly rushing towards them. She lifted her legs, and those long legs seemed to have a huge amount of magic, running towards them at the speed of an arrow. Then, at the moment when she was close to Shenjia, Yun Jian suddenly jumped on the ground with her right foot. She used the momentum of her right foot to sweep her body at a 90-degree angle. At the last second when she was close to Shenjia, she switched from her right foot to her left foot. Her left foot suddenly stretched out, and with a charge, Yun Jian's left foot fiercely kicked Shenjia, whose back was facing her. Shenjia was kicked almost at the same time. His whole body trembled as he took 2 steps forward. His legs went soft, and Shenjia actually knelt down with his face facing down. With this kneeling, Shenjia's upper body couldn't support himself, and he also fell to the ground like a frog. However, in front of Shenjia was a bumpy cement ground. Because of the rain, the bumpy cement ground was filled with a large amount of muddy cement. As for Shenjia, he directly crashed into the cement pit with his face down. However, Shenjia quickly reacted. In any case, Shinjia was also a young master who practiced taekwondo and sanda. When he reacted, he quickly stood up. Yunjian suddenly lifted her leg, and with a horizontal kick, Shinjia was once again kicked into the cement ground. But this time, Shinjia's face was facing the sky. But because of the previous kick, Shinjia's entire face was now covered with muddy cement. He couldn't even open his eyes. However, just as Shinjia was about to get up again, Yunjian's pair of jade feet fiercely stepped on Shinjia's abdomen. Not only that, after Yunjian stretched out her foot to step on Shinjia's abdomen, she also heavily shifted her foot twice. Shinjia felt that his internal organs in his abdomen were about to be shattered by Yunjian's kick. He couldn't open his eyes, and could only let out a scream. Chapter 887. Shinjia could only hear Yunjian's arrogant words that could not be ignored. Because his entire face was soaked in the muddy water, Shinjia could not open his eyes. He could only hear Yunjian's crisp and arrogant words lingering in his ears. However, Shinjia could feel that the foot on his abdomen was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. It was so oppressive that he could not even breathe. Let go. Shinjia was suppressed by the intense pain and did not pay attention to Yunjian's words. As he spoke, he reached out to grab the foot that was stepping on his abdomen. However, the moment Shinjia reached out his hand, Yunjian lifted her foot slightly. The moment Shinjia was about to grab her foot, she lifted her leg slightly to the side and avoided Shinjia's grab. Just as Shinjia heaved a sigh of relief and was about to stand up, Yunjian's foot once again stepped on Shinjia's abdomen. Ouch! Shinjia could not help but let out a painful howl. Who was it? Who was so daring to step on him again and again? Shinjia was the son of a rich family. He had never been treated like this before. Therefore, he immediately roared with hatred, "What are you doing? F***ck, come and help me. Guxian, I was helping you beat up the mistress just now." The word mistress made Yunjian furious. Gu Junjian had already divorced his ex-wife. Therefore, no matter legally or morally, Gu Junjian was still single. Qin Yiru had also divorced Yun Gang. If the two of them were to be together, it would be perfectly justifiable. There was no such thing as a mistress. Moreover, if Gu Junjian was not single, Qin Yiru would not agree to be together with him. Therefore, when Shinjia once again insulted Qin Yiru as a mistress, Yunjian once again lifted her foot and kicked down. Shinjia was kicked by Yunjian and his whole body sank deeper into the cement ground. At this moment, Gu Junjian had already rushed over. What's wrong? What just happened? When Gu Junjian saw Guxian helping Qin Yiru up, he immediately rushed over to help Guxian hold Qin Yiru's hand. Qin Yiru took a long time to react. I'm fine. Qin Yiru slowly regained her senses. After she regained her consciousness, she did not even think of complaining to Gu Junjian about Guxian. At this time, Shinjia's insults came again. F***ck, what are you doing? Hurry up and drag this damned woman out for lousy. Damn it. Yunjian stepped on Shinjia's abdomen. At this moment, Shinjia was as miserable as he could be. However, looking at Yunjian's horrifying appearance, Guxian's other 2 or 3 friends did not dare to go up and pull Yunjian to help Shinjia get out of this predicament. Guxian, on the other hand, ran over after helping Qin Yiru up. Then he looked at Yunjian, paused for a moment, and shouted, "Stop fighting." Ha! Guxian's shout was met with a cold snort from Yunjian. You think we should stop fighting just because you say so? Who do you think you are? Yunjian asked out of the blue. However, just as she finished speaking, Yunjian raised her foot and kicked Guxian's abdomen fiercely again. Does it feel good? That's how you kicked my mother just now. Yunjian's gloomy voice sounded. Her words were mixed with a sneer that could not be ignored. Ah. 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 Shinjia was a person who cared a lot about his reputation. At this moment, he was kicked by a girl and struggled desperately to no avail. This was extremely embarrassing for Shinjie. F***ck. F***ck off. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Shinjie shouted in disdain. Ce, who was standing at the side, heard this and was about to make a move, but Yunjian had already made her move. She took out a butterfly knife from her pocket and stabbed it into the soil next to Shinjie's cheek. When Shinjie's face moved, he felt that if he had turned his head to the side, the butterfly knife would have pierced his head. Suddenly, his whole body trembled. Chapter 888. As long as Shinjie moved his cheek to the left, he would be able to feel the cold butterfly knife sticking to his face. He trembled and his whole body went soft. Shinjie was born into a wealthy family. Even in the whole of country Z, the Shin family was considered one of the top aristocratic families. Kicking Qin Yiru like he did just now was something that Shinjie often did. For a rich man like Shinjie, he usually dressed like a ruffian and looked down on ordinary people because of his prominent family background. Therefore, people like Shinjie would usually bully the nannies in his family. Punching and kicking were common. However, because the Shin family offered a high salary, the nannies were not willing to leave. This was also a fact. The evil behavior that he developed when he was young caused Shinjie to start hitting Qin Yiru when he had the chance. Moreover, fighting with people in school was also a common thing for Shinjie. Even so, Shinjie had never been threatened by a woman who stepped on the ground. What was more frightening was that this woman really dared to use a knife. She wanted to kill him. Shinjie was a rich man's son. Although he would usually get injured when he fought with others, he had never experienced the despair of walking on the edge of death. Of course, perhaps in Shinjie's opinion, getting injured in a fight was a very cool thing. Just as Shinjie was thinking about this, Yunjian's frivolous voice sounded again, "You can die now." After speaking, Shinjie felt the butterfly knife that was stuck to his face being pulled out from the ground by Yunjian. Shinjie's face was covered in mud, even his eyes were stained with mud. Therefore, he could only feel Yunjian's actions. However, when he heard Yunjian's voice, Shinjie's heart jumped wildly. She was not joking. She was serious. At this moment, Shinjie could feel that Yunjian was holding the butterfly knife above his head and was about to chop it down on his head. No. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I was wrong. Shinjie's voice trembled as he begged for mercy, his arrogance completely washed away. The arrogant Shinjie just now had become like this. Yunjian merely scoffed. "Xiao Jian, don't." Just as Yunjian's knife was about to land on Shinjie's face, Qin Yiru's shout rang out. Yunjian retracted the knife in time. Yunjian had never thought of killing Shinjie. Moreover, Yunjian was an advanced special forces soldier now, but they could not kill people recklessly like this. If that was the case, there would be no law in this world. Yunjian wanted to teach Shinjie a lesson. At the very least, it had to be the kind of lesson where they wouldn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Before Yunjian made a move, Qin Yiru's voice rang. "Xiao Jian, don't do this. Put the knife away. You're part of the military now, don't tarnish the military's reputation." Qin Yiru panicked when she saw Yunjian pointing the knife at Shinjie, so she went over to snatch the butterfly knife from Yunjian's hand and pulled Yunjian to the side. Shinjie breathed a sigh of relief when Yunjian was pulled away. The foot that exerted gravity on his stomach disappeared. Shinjie seemed to have been reborn. He lay on the ground and took a few deep breaths. As Qin Yiru pulled Yunjian away, Guxian heard a few thunderous words. Guxian turned to Gujunjian immediately. "Dad, she's from the military?" he asked unwillingly. Chapter 889. Guxian's words sent chills down Shinjie's spine, who was lying lifelessly on the floor, as well as Guxian's other two buddies. Yunjian was from the military? While Guxian and his men were still in shock at Qin Yiru's words, Qin Yiru had already pulled Yunjian to the side. Xiao Jian, I'm fine. I'm still strong. It's okay, it's okay. Shenjia had kicked her hard just now and it was painful, but Qin Yiru still bore the pain and consoled Yunjian. Qin Yiru was behaving this way partly because Shenjia was Guxian's buddy after all. Guxian was quite a pitiful child and it was apparent from what happened just now that Guxian was not a bad person. When Shenjia kicked her just now, he even stood up to stop it. Qin Yiru did not like people like Shenjia. People like him were practically thugs. He was the kind of person that people would say, whoever hung out with him would be led astray. Guxian hung out with these buddies purely because he wanted to be noticed by Gu Junjian so that Gu Junjian could fulfill his responsibility as a father. In spite of it, Gu Junjian seemed to have gotten the wrong idea. He felt that he had let Guxian down, so he ignored Guxian even more after that. As a result, Guxian became more and more depraved and had befriended a bunch of gangsters now. Even when he was overseas, he got into fights every day. The group of people he befriended was no different from Shenjia's group. They were people who would even beat up women and children. The other main reason was that if Yunjian killed Shenjia because of this, she would not be able to avoid jail time even if Yunjian was a member of the advanced special forces. Qin Yiru's proudest thing was to have Yunjian and Yun-Yi as her children. How could she possibly watch Yunjian do something foolish? In spite of it, Qin Yiru did not know that Yunjian did not want to kill Shenjia just now. She only wanted to intimidate him. Of course, that was enough to scare Shenjia half to death from Yunjian. Qin Yiru's persuasion was effective on Yunjian as Yunjian calmed down right away. Mom, you don't have to do this. A murderous look flashed across Yunjian's cold eyes as she looked at Qin Yiru. She then paused and looked at Shenjia, who was lying on the ground. My mom forgave you today, so I won't pursue the matter. If you dare to lay a hand on my mom again, even the Jade Emperor won't be able to stop you from meeting the King of Hell. After Yunjian finished speaking, she turned and helped Qin Yiru into the house. As they walked, Yunjian asked, Mom, does it hurt? Come in quickly, I'll take a look. After Yunjian left, Ce did not. His tall figure was even more conspicuous than the others present. Especially his handsome face and the murderous look on his face, everyone felt that he was handsome no matter how they looked at him. Shenjia had already been helped up by the two brothers who were too stunned to help. Guxian and Gu Junjian were still standing in the same spot. Being supported by Yunjian, Qin Yiru finally felt the pain coming from her waist. Shenjia had kicked her there and she felt that her body was about to fall apart. However, after taking 2 steps, Qin Yiru turned around. She looked at the few people who were still standing in the rain and urged, hurry up and go into the house. It's still raining. Nothing is more important than your health. After Qin Yiru finished speaking, she was helped into the house by Yunjian. After hearing Qin Yiru's words, Guxian knew that Qin Yiru's words were meant for him. Was she concerned about him? Chapter 890. Guxian had never experienced a mother's love before. After Guxian's mother gave birth to Guxian, she left Guxian at home and went out to meet people dressed to the nines. Even so, Guxian did not resent his birth mother. There was no other reason other than the fact that she was his birth mother. No matter how badly she treated him, he could only accept it. Ever since Gu Junjian divorced his birth mother, Guxian was disheartened by them, but Guxian still held on to a tiny bit of illusion. What if his parents remarried one day? Then, like other parents, they would pamper and spoil their children, even if they were not pampered or spoiled, no matter how hard their days were. As long as they cared for him a little, that would be enough. In spite of it, Guxian actually felt a hint of kinship from this woman who was about to become his stepmother. Was he hallucinating? Even his birth parents had never given him any kinship. How could he feel kinship from someone else? Xian, stop fooling around. Your auntie is a kind person. She's not like what you said. That was Xiao Jian just now. Since you asked, I won't hide it from you. Xiao Jian is part of my military. Gu Junjian did not plan to hide this from his son. In spite of it, after Gu Junjian said that Yun Jian was part of his military, Gu Xian's indignant groan rang again. What did you say? She's really part of your military? As he spoke, Gu Xian's indignant voice rang again. You actually let her join your army? I wanted to join your military back then, but you didn't allow it. You even said that I wasn't capable enough. What about now? Have you really been bewitched? You're letting a little girl like her join the military. You didn't even want me to join back then. Gu Xian raised his voice. Gu Xian also had the heart to protect his country. When he was young, he took Gu Junjian as his role model. Ever since he was young, he wanted to be a soldier, but Gu Junjian did not give him the chance. Gu Junjian was the leader of the advanced special forces. At the same time, he also had the authority to recruit outstanding youths from all over the country. Gu Xian wanted to join the advanced special forces and become a member, but Gu Junjian did not give him the chance. Therefore, when Gu Xian found out that Yun Jian had joined the military, he was furious. Although Yun Jian was so fierce just now, Gu Xian didn't think that Yun Jian was that capable. In other words, Gu Xian himself was a martial artist. He knew that Yun Jian had some skills, but he would not admit that Yun Jian was better than him. Under such circumstances, how could Gu Xian not think about it? Why would his father rather let Yun Jian join the advanced special forces than let him join? If this wasn't favoritism, then what was? Shut up. Xian heir, what do you know? Gu Junjian gritted his teeth in anger. He wanted to tell him everything, but the words that were about to leave his mouth were stopped. Isn't that so? If you weren't bewitched, why would you let her join the advanced special forces? Gu Xian raised his voice again. At this time, Shenjia was already being helped up. Why? You want to know why, right? Gu Junjian couldn't hold it in anymore and cried out in pain. Because she's better than you. She's stronger than you, whether it's strength or ability, she's better than you. Although Gu Junjian didn't want to belittle his own son, he had to admit it. Chapter 891. It was rare for Gu Xian to hear his father use such words against him. Most importantly, he had never heard his father praise someone in such a tone before. It could be said that in Gu Xian's mind, his father was someone who would never praise others. Therefore, Gu Xian was very surprised. Forget it, forget it. There's no point in talking about this anymore. Let's go home. Gu Junjian had a headache from arguing with Gu Xian. He reached out and touched his forehead, brushed his short hair, and said to Gu Xian. Gu Xian was not convinced, but Gu Junjian had already said so. Moreover, he was no longer a child. He had been Gu Yunjian's father for so many years. How could he not understand Gu Junjian? Gu Junjian never turned back once he did something. Knowing this, Gu Xian did not intend to continue arguing. Bang! Just as Gu Xian had calmed down and was about to go home with Gu Junjian, he heard the sound of a heavy object being slammed to the ground. Gu Xian and Gu Junjian both turned to look at the same time. Shenjia, who had just stood up and wiped the cement on his face with a napkin and had just regained his sight, was kicked to the ground again by Ce with a hard kick, causing a loud thud to resound in the air. Ce's kick sent Shenjia flying, the bones in his body crackling. Shenjia did not expect that Ce did not follow Yunjian back to the house to teach him a lesson. At this moment, Shenjia had been kicked to the ground. He did not even have time to react. However, the bones in his body were still making cracking sounds. In the next second, Shenjia's painful howl resounded through the sky. Ah! My leg! Ah! The cracking of bones was enough to prove that the bones in Shenjia's leg were broken. Ce had broken his leg with a single kick. Everyone present was shocked by Ce's ferocious actions. Especially Gu Xian and Gu Junjian. She had just seen Ce standing beside Yunjian without saying a word. What happened in the end? Just as Yun Jian helped Qin Yiru into the house, Ce was even more ruthless than Yun Jian. He kicked Shen Jie's foot so hard that the bones in his foot were broken. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Just as everyone present was looking at Ce in shock, they saw Ce raise his long legs and walk unsteadily towards Shen Jie, who had been kicked to the ground and was hugging his leg as he howled in pain. You! What are you doing? Gu Xian and Shen Jie's other two friends saw Ce walking towards them. The moment they thought of Ce's actions, they felt their hair stand on end. Now that Ce was walking towards them, they retreated in fear. Ce didn't say a word. He walked straight to Shen Jie and bent down slightly. He reached out his bony hand and grabbed Shen Jie's collar. With this grab, Ce actually pulled Shen Jie up from the ground. Ah! You! What are you doing? Shen Jie was sweating profusely after a few seconds of pain. He stared at Ce as if he was looking at a ferocious beast. How dare you touch my mother-in-law? Do you think I'll let you off? A murderous look flashed across Ce's sharp eyes. He curved his handsome face and curved his lips. There was an undeniable ruthlessness on his face. Shen Jie was in so much pain that his entire body was trembling. His abdomen, which had been kicked by Yun Jian, was still hurting. He wasn't joking. Right now, Ce was like a king who looked down on all living beings. His tall posture and his flamboyant words did not feel out of place at all. Chapter 892. Shen Jie didn't expect Ce to be so calculative. In the past, Shen Jie was always the one who bullied others, and there was no reason for others to bully him. Moreover, people like Shen Jie liked to form cliques. When they were studying abroad, they formed a gang, and it was equivalent to the kind of gang that was formed to fight with others. Therefore, under such circumstances, Shen Jie felt that he had a lot of face. Therefore, when he kicked Qin Yiru, his foppish character was revealed. When he kicked Qin Yiru, he used all his strength. However, Shen Jie didn't expect that Ce would actually attack him. Moreover, he was so ruthless that he didn't even have a chance to fight back. Under Ce's pressure, Shen Jie had no choice but to lower his head. He was so scared that his whole body was trembling. Then, he said, I was wrong. I can apologize. Shen Jie felt that his legs were about to be crippled. He had never met people like Ce and Yun Jian. The former had just beaten him up, and Qin Yiru had stopped her from killing him. However, the latter had broken his bones with one kick. He had only kicked Qin Yiru a few times. If Shen Jie had known that this would happen, he probably wouldn't have attacked Qin Yiru. Frankly speaking, he wouldn't have dared to do it even if he was beaten to death. However, this time, Ce didn't care about Shen Jie. In front of Gu Xian and Gu Junjian, he grabbed Shen Jie's collar and kicked Shen Jie's abdomen fiercely. This was enough to break all the bones in Shen Jie's body. Ah! Shen Jie howled as he was sent flying. After he landed heavily, he lay on the ground in the distance and didn't make any more noise. He wasn't dead, he just fainted. Shen Jie. Gu Xian and Shen Jie's other two friends saw this and rushed over in fright. F***ck. Gu Xian cursed. Then, he ran over as well. After Ce kicked Shen Jie, he wasn't worried about Shen Jie's life at all. Instead, he walked into the house. His tall figure walked in the drizzle and soon disappeared in front of everyone. In any case, Shen Jie was his brother, so Gu Xian and two other people helped Shen Jie to the hospital. Gu Junjian didn't follow him. After giving Gu Xian some instructions, Gu Junjian returned to his room. Hence, Gu Xian drove the unconscious Shen Jie to a nearby hospital. The gathering at Gu Yunjian's house this time was very unpleasant because of Gu Xian's return. Therefore, no one ate much at dinner. Of course, except for Adam, Mo Sen, and a few others. At night, Yun Jian and the others returned to Dong Ruan's villa. The next day, When Yunjian woke up and came back from her morning run, Qin Yiru had already gone to Gu Yunjian's house to prepare breakfast for Gu Xian. Gu Junjian had gone to the army. Qin Yiru was a kind person. She was afraid that Gu Xian wouldn't eat breakfast alone at home, so she hurried over to prepare breakfast for Gu Xian. Yunjian was afraid that Gu Xian or his friends would cause trouble again, so Yunjian took 2 pieces of bread that Qin Yiru had prepared for her and walked towards Gu Yunjian's house as if she was taking a stroll. At the entrance of Gu Yunjian's house, Yunjian met Gu Xian, who had just come out of the villa. The moment Gu Xian saw Yunjian, he snorted coldly and wanted to walk around Yunjian. Stop. Yunjian didn't turn around to look at Gu Xian. She just snorted softly. Hearing Yunjian snort, Gu Xian just snorted and wanted to walk around Yunjian. How about a race? As a racing enthusiast, you should be very interested in racing. If I can beat you, you're not allowed to be so rude to my mother in the future, Yunjian said when she saw Gu Xian walk around her. She wasn't angry. Yunjian's words really stunned Gu Xian. Chapter 893. Gu Xian's face was full of surprise. Racing was a symbol of wildness. At the same time, in foreign countries, especially in Gu Xian's school, men who could race and drive well would be regarded as extremely manly and charming by girls. Like the wind, Gu Xian and several of his buddies also became obsessed with racing. During his school days, Gu Xian was extremely obsessed with racing. It could be said that he was obsessed with it to a whole new level. Racing itself was exciting and dangerous. Perhaps in the beginning, Gu Xian and the others followed the trend to learn how to race. But it was undeniable that Gu Xian and the others were indeed obsessed with racing later. However, his interest in racing was not even mentioned to his own father, Gu Junjian. How did Yunjian know? Gu Xian originally intended to ignore Yunjian, but when he heard Yunjian's words, he was stunned on the spot, so he hurriedly turned around and asked. Yunjian slowly crossed her arms in front of her chest. She appeared relaxed, but did not speak immediately. Just when Gu Xian thought that Yunjian would not speak, Yunjian's voice suddenly sounded, "Your sports car has been modified, right?" Yunjian's words were not a question, but an affirmative tone. It was only then that Gu Xian turned back to look at his sports car that was parked not too far away at Yunjian's words. Then he looked at Yunjian in a daze and nodded, yes. After being stunned, Gu Xian was puzzled again. How do you know that my sports car has been modified? And you didn't get close to my sports car to observe, how? Gu Xian had just finished asking when he was interrupted by Yunjian. I accidentally saw it last night. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell at a glance that it has been modified. Yunjian paused for a beat before she continued, you're right. Why would a normal person think of modifying a sports car? What's more, I saw a lot of scratches on your sports car. Unless you are a racing enthusiast, unless it is a sports car, how could it be modified like this by you? Yunjian's explanation made Gu Xian speechless. But it turned out that Yunjian's words were all reasonable. Ahem. Gu Xian coughed softly. He obviously did not expect his stepmother's daughter to be able to see this. Could it be that a girl like her also liked racing? Ahem, you are a girl, do you also like to study these things? Gu Xian was suddenly interested in Yunjian. He changed his attitude of ignoring Yunjian and immediately asked Yunjian. Of course, he was only interested in this kind of curiosity towards his sister at most. However, Gu Xian did not notice the change in his mentality at all. However, Gu Xian still did not believe that Yunjian knew how to drive a race car. After all, Yunjian was still underage. At 16 years old, she was still considered a minor in Z country and could not get a driver's license. How could she start school without a driver's license? Unless she was a genius? Otherwise, who would have the ability to do so? Yunjian saw that Gu Xian did not believe her, but she was not angry. She put down her arms and reached out with her left hand to lift her high ponytail that fell on her chest. Yunjian's way of lifting her hair was different from a little girl's. Her arrogant look made even Gu Xian's eyes pop out of their sockets. But Gu Xian's eyes simply lit up. Chapter 894. Yun Jian's words seemed to cause an uproar in Gu Xian's ears. What did she mean by his sports car being modified to the point of being unsightly? Gu Xian was an upright man. He thought of something and asked on the spot, "What do you mean by my sports car being modified to the point of being unsightly?" As Gu Xian spoke, he had already followed Yun Jian's words and ran aggressively to his sports car. He circled his car left and right before shouting at Yun Jian, "My car is a famous car personally modified by America's top mechanic, Master Corentin. How can it be unsightly?" The Master Corentin that Gu Xian mentioned was a top mechanic in America. Even in the entire mechanic industry, Corentin was a well-known figure. Legend had it that it was very difficult to get Corentin to modify something. This was because even money wasn't tempting enough to get Corentin to modify something. One had to be someone with international status to be qualified to negotiate with Corentin. The sports car in Gu Xian's hands was bought from someone else. Therefore, Gu Xian cherished this sports car very much. To Gu Xian, owning this sports car was even more exciting than getting Corentin's autograph. Moreover, Corentin enjoyed a certain amount of international authority. Gu Xian had no doubts about Corentin at all. But today, Yun Jian actually said in front of him that Corentin's modified works were unsightly. Didn't she know? International racers all wanted Corentin to modify a sports car for them, but the number of people who could actually be modified by Corentin could be counted on one's fingers. Didn't she know that if her words were heard by some people with ulterior motives, it would cause public outrage? Yun Jian heard Gu Xian's indignant voice, but Yun Jian only raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard Gu Xian's words. Seeing Yun Jian's reaction, Gu Xian thought that Yun Jian had heard of Corentin's name. Gu Xian was also a person who cared about his reputation. He thought that Yun Jian was dumbfounded by his words, so he raised his head somewhat arrogantly. Look, his car was modified by Master Corentin. Yun Jian would probably admire him for being able to get a sports car modified by Master Corentin after hearing that. Gu Xian looked at Yun Jian with his mouth slightly agape. Gu Xian looked forward to seeing Yun Jian look at him with admiration or envy. However, what Gu Xian saw was Yun Jian's eyelids flashing and her eyebrows slightly raised. Then, he heard Yun Jian say, "So it's a sports car modified by that old man Corentin? This car is probably the trashiest of all his modified sports cars." Yun Jian made a tsk sound as she spoke. Gu Xian was completely stunned when he heard Yun Jian's words. Yun Jian's way of addressing him? Plus Yun Jian's words. You know Master Corentin?" Gu Xian looked at Yun Jian in disbelief. Corentin was an eccentric person. It was said that there were very few people who could get close to him internationally. Gu Xian only heard of one person who was very close to Corentin. Hearing Yun Jian call Corentin an old man, why did it feel like she knew Corentin? Gu Xian looked at Yun Jian with great anticipation. She actually knew Master Corentin. However, he heard Yun Jian's soft voice. Just a defeated opponent. Chapter 895. Yun Jian's tone was ostentatious, but there was an arrogance that could not be ignored. However, for some reason, Gu Xian did not think that Yun Jian was joking. "Master Corentin was defeated by you? Are you sure?" Gu Xian exclaimed. After that, Gu Xian asked again to confirm. "Don't tell me you don't know who Master Corentin is? He's the best mechanic in the world. Whether it's a sports car or any other mechanical equipment, there's nothing he doesn't know how to do as long as it's unheard of. I don't mean to criticize you, but you haven't even met Master Corentin before, have you? Why would you say that Master Corentin was defeated by you?" Gu Xian exclaimed in surprise. Yun Jian did not follow Gu Xian's words. Instead, she changed the topic and asked Gu Xian, "Do you admire Corentin a lot?" After being asked by Gu Xian indeed changed the topic. We race car enthusiasts admire him a lot because the cars he modified are twice as fast as ordinary sports cars and race cars. Guxian looked into the distance in admiration and said. If Guxian looked down on Yunjian before, then at least Guxian knew that Yunjian knew about racing. After all, if it was someone who did not know about racing, they would definitely not be able to tell that his sports car had been modified. Therefore, Guxian and Yunjian started chatting unknowingly. He even said in a regretful tone, "Sigh, if I can get Master Corentin to modify another Maserati sports car for me, I'll have no regrets." Guxian's tone carried a hint of a sigh. Everyone knew that Corentin was an eccentric old man. He would not help you modify a sports car even if you paid for it. Unless you made him happy, he would modify it for free. Guxian's sports car had been in the hands of many people. By the time he got his hands on it, it was already an old car that had been driven by many people. However, this was a car modified by Master Corentin, so Guxian would rather drive this old car than replace it. Yunjian stood where she was and cast a sidelong glance at Guxian as she continued, "As long as you get the Maserati modified by Corentin, you'll be more respectful to my mother?" Yunjian knew that Qin Yiru didn't want Guxian to disappear. Qin Yiru was kind-hearted, and Guxian was not a bad person. That was why Yunjian negotiated with Guxian. This was the third time he heard Yunjian negotiate with him, and it was all for Qin Yiru. Guxian blinked. He didn't directly answer Yunjian's question. Instead, he asked Yunjian somewhat enviously, "You and your mother must have a good relationship, right?" In Guxian's impression, his mother would only dress up gorgeously and fool around, only coming home in the middle of the night. His mother had never cared about him. Yes. Yunjian nodded. Guxian's red, yellow, blue, and green hair didn't match his somewhat lonely image at all. That's great. Guxian sighed deeply. The envy in his tone didn't diminish at all. As Guxian spoke, he walked away somewhat dejectedly. This time, Yunjian didn't stop Guxian. After taking 2 steps, Guxian turned his head to look at Yunjian. He chuckled, but this laugh wasn't at Yunjian, but at himself, who was lonely. "I won't scold your mother anymore." As Guxian walked, he lowered his head and continued, "Master Corentin is an internationally famous big shot. Until now, no one has been able to invite him. The only person who could possibly invite Master Corentin couldn't possibly be Yunjian." Chapter 896. Guxian felt that since he was already so lonely, there was no need for him to make others feel the same way. Besides, Qin Yiru had rushed over so early in the morning to make breakfast for him. It was impossible for Guxian not to be touched. After all, even Guxian's own mother had never cooked for him. Guxian also found a bit of motherly love from Qin Yiru. "So you don't have to think of a way to hire Master Corentin," said Guxian. With that, he laughed self-deprecatingly and turned to get into his sports car. Then, he started the engine and stepped on the gas pedal to leave. It was not that Guxian looked down on Yunjian, but because Corentin was an internationally famous big shot. Moreover, Corentin was a weirdo in the mechanical world. If you wanted to hire him, you couldn't use money. He would only do it if he liked the person. Moreover, out of 1,000 people, there wasn't a single person that he liked. Therefore, Guxian was not looking down on Yunjian's words, but he instinctively did not believe her. In the end, Yunjian was still standing in the same spot when Guxian drove away. Yunjian stood in the same spot and smiled slightly. After a while, she took out her phone from her trouser pocket and dialed a number that she remembered in her mind but had never taken the initiative to call. Beep beep beep. After 3 rings, the call did not go through. The ringtone rang for almost half a minute. Just as the ringtone was about to end, the call was suddenly picked up. "Hello?" A very lazy, old man's voice in pure English came from Yunjian's phone. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She knew that this phone number was Corentin's private landline. Most people did not have Corentin's private landline number. "Old man, please do me a favor, Yun Jian spoke into the phone in English very decisively. How dare you call this old man an old man? Who are you, little girl? Corentin was annoyed when he heard Yun Jian's address. He immediately opened his mouth angrily. Even through the phone, Yun Jian could feel that the other party was holding a landline with a childish expression. He was frowning at the landline and pretending to be angry. I'm SS. Yun Jian paused in the middle of her words, then she softly spat out a letter. After Yun Jian spat out the letter, she clearly heard the sound of a chair being flipped over from the other end of the phone. On the other end of the line, when Corentin heard the word SS, he wanted to stand, but unexpectedly, his leg exerted force and hooked onto his own chair. The chair was hooked and was accidentally kicked over by his own foot. Corentin fell to the ground along with the chair. However, the pain to him, the word SS. Corentin got up from the floor and crawled to the phone he had accidentally flung away at the fastest speed in his life. He trembled as he picked up the phone. Then, he used the most benevolent voice he could muster and said, "You. Why are you calling me? No, are you planning to take me in as your disciple?" Yun Jian had never called Corentin on her own accord. The reason Corentin believed that Yun Jian was SS just because of what she said was because other than this unknown number, the people who knew his number were all people he knew. Of course, Corentin had saved the phone number of someone he knew. Country Zhejiang Province's Longmen City. Call me back when you've arrived. I won't wait for you if you're late, Yun Jian said with a faint smile. SS was the abbreviation for her by the people in the underworld. Chapter 897. Yun Jian did not give a direct reply to Corentin's words. Instead, it was Corentin who sounded flattered. All right. No, I'll fly my private helicopter over tonight. Wait for me, you must wait for me. Yun Jian pressed her lips together lightly and hung up. Not many people knew that she was slaying God, the top secret agent in the secret agent ranking. Even international tycoons and top figures rarely knew about her identity. Knowing Corentin under the identity of slaying God had a history as well. Yun Jian had thought that she would not need Corentin's private number when he had forced it on her, but she did not expect to use it so soon. It was fortunate that she had memorized Corentin's number when she saw it back then. Otherwise, she would not have been able to reach him. After making the call to Corentin, Yun Jian turned to enter Gu Yunjian's villa. Yun Jian headed to New Cruise after meeting up with Qin Yiru. Recently, New Cruise had been planning to expand the company to all major regions in the country through franchising. Of course, New Cruise's headquarters was in Longmen City and this would not change. What was franchising? It was when a brand was established, selling their products to the entire country by collecting franchising fees. Those who applied for franchising had to follow the headquarters in the renovation of their storefronts and the management model. New Cruise was still planning this, so Yun Jian had been visiting the company more frequently recently. There were some things that Zhang Jifan could not do, so Yun Jian had to do it herself. It was Saturday night. Yun Jian had promised Chen Sini to have dinner at her house and she would not go back on her word. Moreover, Yun Jian wanted to check on Chen Sini's condition. Yun Jian had gone to Zhang Xiaofeng's house the last time. She had also arranged to meet Zhang Xiaofeng at his doorstep. After Yun Jian was done with New Cruise's matters, she went straight to Zhang Xiaofeng's house. Zhang Xiaofeng had been waiting for Yun Jian at his doorstep for quite some time. It was only when a silhouette came from afar that he waved frantically. Master. When Yun Jian heard the greeting, she knew it must be Zhang Xiaofeng without thinking. Hence, Yun Jian went to Zhang Xiaofeng. Beside Zhang Xiaofeng was a chubby Zhang Jian. Zhang Jian was rubbing his head as he greeted Yun Jian cutely, Grandmaster. Yun Jian grinned and said, "Let's go." Zhang Jian had carried Chen Sini to the hospital and was considered to have saved her life. Hence, he was naturally invited to Chen Sini's house for dinner. In reality, Chen Sini's father, Qin Jinchuan, had not only invited Yun Jian and the rest. Chen Sini had just recovered from a serious illness while Chen Jinshuan was a businessman. A businessman should know how to do business. This kind of thing could be used as a pretext to invite some of his business partners over for a meal and talk about business, which was very good. Hence, when Zhang Xiaofeng brought Yun Jian and the rest to Chen Sini's house, they saw a few tables of food. Chen Sini's leg was not injured to begin with, so she could walk normally. Chen Sini's face was only slightly pale due to excessive blood loss. The most important thing for Chen Sini now was to replenish her blood composition. Yun Jian and the rest walked into the house and saw Chen Sini sitting at one of the tables, looking a little unhappy. In addition to Chen Sini, there were several other young men and women around the same age as Chen Sini sitting at the table. However, Yun Jian did not know any of them. Chapter 898. Yun Jian heard Chen Sini's shouts once she entered and saw Chen Sini waving at her, beckoning her over. Looks like we're late. The dishes are almost all here. Zhang Xiaofeng lamented before he headed over with Yun Jian and Zhang Jian. We're not late at all. It's fine as long as there's food. Zhang Jian added gluttonously as they walked. In return, Zhang Xiaofeng rolled his eyes and smacked him from top to bottom. Look at you, you're so useless. As Zhang Xiaofeng and Zhang Jian spoke, both of them followed behind Yun Jian. Jian, I've snatched this seat especially for you. Come over quickly. Seeing Yun Jian coming over, Chen Sini waved her hand quickly as if she was afraid that the seat she had snatched would be snatched away by someone else. TSK, you heartless Chen Sini. You didn't even snatch a seat for us. Zhang Xiaofeng teased. Then, the group sat down. There was a group of people sitting at the tables next to them. Only Yun Jian's table was filled with children. In reality, this was how it was usually arranged. The adults sat with the adults while the children sat with the children. Sometimes, the children's table would have their mothers with them. Yun Jian glanced around her table and saw that there were a few women at the same table as her. Of course, most of them were young men and women. It was not hard to tell that some of them were brought here by their mothers to attend the dinner. Be it the children or the women, they must have come with their fathers or husbands. Their fathers or husbands were also seated at the same table as Chen Sini's father, Chen Jinshuan. Seeing Yun Jian and her friends coming over, Chen Jinshuan, who was seated at the same table as himself, stood up. In any case, he would not forget that he was treating his daughter today because she had just recovered from a serious illness. Chen Jinshuan would never forget that the reason why his daughter could stand here alive was because Yun Jian, Zhang Xiaofeng, and Zhang Jian had saved her in time. You guys are here? Chen Jinshuan walked over to Yun Jian and the others with a wine glass in his hand. Yun Jian could tell that Chen Jinshuan's question was directed at her, so she nodded in response. Sorry for the inconvenience, haha. Chen Jinshuan laughed twice, and then continued to speak to Yun Jian. Thank you very much. Sini, you have to entertain your friends on my behalf. Chen Jinshuan said with a smile. Got it, Dad. Chen Sini nodded. Jinshuan, is this your Sini? Because Chen Jinshuan walked over, everyone's gaze turned towards him. At this moment, at the same table as Yun Jian and the others, a woman in her 40s with a twisted face asked Chen Jinshuan. Obviously, this woman knew Chen Jinshuan. Huh, that's right, this is my Sini. Chen Jinshuan said this and laughed twice. Jinshuan, I heard that Baiguang Model Agency has been banned from the industry. Also, the genitals of those talent scouts have been cut off. One of them even had 2 fingers chopped off. Did you do this, huh? A man seemed to want to show off, so he used this matter as a topic to bring it up again. Chen Jinshuan was stunned, and then he replied, I didn't do it. I can't say for sure that Baiguang Model Agency was banned, but those talent scouts' genitals were cut off. I heard that a few girls who escaped said that a young girl chopped off 2 fingers of one of the talent scouts and ordered people to cut off their genitals. I don't know if this is true. Someone added. Master, I remember that you were the last to leave. Did you do that? Zhang Xiaofeng heard the noise and asked Yunjian, "You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."